Morning, everybody. Welcome to the 15th annual Carole McLeod Entrepreneur Summit here at Appalachian State. We're very happy that you're all here. I want to just sort of take a moment and thank a few people who made this day possible. I'm going to start with our sponsors. First, I'd like to highlight my friends from Skyline over here. You can stand up and give a little wave if you don't mind. Skyline is one of the reasons that this area has so much potential because they bring really, really fast internet to this region. So if you don't have that in your area, go see them and tell them that you need it. That's what I've been doing. The second group I want to thank is Life Store. Where's my Life Store friends? Oh, over here. Stand up, say hello. Life Store is one of the last regional banks around, and you've got the opportunity to take a session with Life Store Bank and hear about their financial services. And they've been longtime supporters of the Center for Entrepreneurship, so we're happy they're here as well. Next on the list is the SBTDC. Where are those friends? They're right here in the front. The SBTDC is the Small Business and Technology Development Center. So if you are somebody who is interested in starting a business, or if you have a small or medium-sized business, you're interested in growing it and bringing additional people or capital into the mix, these guys are a great free resource from the state of North Carolina. So I'd encourage you to make sure you know who those folks are. I also want to acknowledge and welcome our friends from Watauga and Ash High School over here. So say hello to our high school people. We're trying to get them excited about entrepreneurship early, so they're excited to come here to Appalachian State and participate in our entrepreneurship programs. So if you get a chance to mingle with those students, I encourage you to do that. I want to start by introducing you to my boss, the Dean of the College of Business, Heather Norris. So Dr. Norris is going to come up and say a few words and greet everybody this morning. Thanks, boss.
I don't know why he keeps insisting on using that four-letter word. I don't consider myself anybody's boss. In fact, I have a wonderful team. We'll use that four-letter word. A wonderful team that I work with here at Appalachian in the Walker College of Business. And we are so fortunate to, again, have the support of our sponsors. Thank you from me as well to you. As you know, this is a large enterprise, and it really is a community effort. And we so much appreciate your partnership with us. I also want to thank Eric and his team because they're the brains and the action behind making this event happen. Sarah, I'm looking right at you because I know how many hours you put into this event, getting everybody ready, making people aware, and coming up with really cool, innovative ways of sharing the message all throughout the building. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Eric. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers today, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know all of you are too. Everybody in the room, I think, knows how important innovation is now more than ever. And as a business school, it wasn't always the case that we had the freedom to be as innovative as we can be today. And that may sound kind of strange to you. We have accrediting bodies that have certain expectations of it. We have an industry called academic research expectations and other schools that we compete against for our faculty. And so our faculty always want to stay marketable, just like everybody in industry always wants to stay marketable. And so as a business school, there are some kind of competing forces within to say, you need to keep up with your academic research. You need to be excellent in the classroom, and you need to do some service responsibilities. Well, for us in the Walker College of Business, that definition of service is and has always been community and industry oriented. And really, our teaching and research have been and are becoming more so active and really applied. And we are looking at innovation now more than we ever have. So our Entrepreneurship Center is a leader in that realm for us. And we're trying to spread that entrepreneurial spirit throughout the college and the programs that we do, alongside of really the analytics, you know. And I know all of you are smiling at me because that's a big thing in industry right now too. And so that combination kind of the critical thinking, the analysis, the innovation, and the resiliency are the key drivers to what we're doing in the classroom, to what we're doing in our research, and to our partnership with community industry. So thanks again for being here. And for you, those of you in high school, we look forward to you exploring our Martha Guy Summer Institute program and your applications to Appalachian. When you're ready to do a tour, if you haven't already, those are always available. So please do reach out for us for that. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it back to Eric. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Norris. So I'll let you in on a little secret. Our 9:30 speaker is 8.5 months pregnant and not here yet. So we're wondering, when she comes walking in, my blood pressure is going to go down about 20 points. So I figure I'll let you in on that little secret, but she should be here in a minute. I do want to take a few minutes. We have, as you just heard, we've got an entrepreneurship program in Appalachian, and our goal. Oh, she's already here. Good, that's good. Thank you. So Tung will get the presentation here in just a second. So as I was saying, we have our entrepreneurship program here at Appalachian, and we're constantly on the hunt for people who are interested in being entrepreneurs. They want to explore entrepreneurship in some way, shape, or form throughout their life. And so I know that as you sit in a set of presentations like this, and we're going to go all day, right until the end. At the end, we've got a big idea pitch competition in the Parkway Ballroom at 5 o'clock, where students are going to pitch their ideas for a business. We've got 10 finalists, and we bring in beer and we bring in food, and it's a big celebration of creativity and student innovation. So I hope that you all want to stay around for that. But we're going to pump your heads full of all sorts of interesting information and try to get you to think. And I imagine that since you're sitting here at an entrepreneur summit, you're probably thinking that there's at least some inkling of interest in owning your own business someday. So as you sit and listen to these speakers, you're going to say to yourself, what is it that made these entrepreneurs successful? And how did they do it? And maybe most importantly, could that be me? So what I wanted to do with the next 15 minutes is just give you a little perspective and context on what you're about to see, if you're the type of person that might be exploring that. So one of the questions I get quite often is, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then when you hear these speakers, I want you to be thinking about, what am I seeing here? What is it that has made them successful? And then maybe you can find some of those traits and skills in yourself. So we boiled down the mindset of an entrepreneur to 7 characteristics. And not everybody has to have all of these, but when somebody has big combinations of these 7 things, they're a perfect candidate to be exploring something. I'll just pick a couple of these. The number 1 is passionate. If you're really passionate about getting something done, about having an impact, about being your own boss, making something for yourself, if that's driving you, entrepreneurship might be for you, because that is the number 1 thing that people need. Adventurous is another one I'll mention, and a lot of people call that risk averse or someone that is risk tolerant. But if you can look at the world as a series of adventures, and you have a thick enough skin that when something goes wrong, you can push through it, if you're creative enough and you view every day as a new opportunity, that's the thing that gets you out of bed every day. That's also helpful, because anybody in the room who's ever been an entrepreneur or knows of entrepreneurs, they know that there's ups and there's downs. There's certainly triumphs and there's tribulations, and it's all part of the process. So if you can look at the world as an adventure, that's an important one. We also put storyteller on the list, because whenever you're communicating to somebody, if you just give them the facts and the figures and here's the features of what I do, you don't have nearly the impact if somebody is a natural storyteller. If somebody knows how to tell the story of the vision they've created for their business, or the vision they have for themselves, or the impact that they want to have on the world, then they're uniquely qualified to deliver that same kind of message to an investor or to a customer or to a team of employees who you need to follow you. So somebody who's a good storyteller is also a really good characteristic for an entrepreneur. And then the last one I'll mention is grit. Grit gets back to being able to push through challenges, being able to work at something that throws obstacles in your path. The students that come in and they crack me up because I can tell when they show up. They've got their clipboard, they've got their pen, they're taking notes. Everything I say, they write it down. I tell them, here's the first step. This is what customer discovery is all about. And they're writing it down. And then they're back in my office in a week and they have surveys of people that they've talked to. One of them sitting right back there, his name is Spencer Daniel. But they're one step ahead of us constantly because they recognize the resource and they're constantly pushing and driving and trying to figure out how to get to the next level. So if you take the mindset of an entrepreneur and that's the foundation, if any of those kind of characteristics resonate with you, then you're off to a good start. The next thing that we encourage people is observation. And it's not just observation of the world around you, but a lot of it is an observation of yourself. It's an honest assessment of what skills you bring to the table and what natural talents do you have? And what do you think is the greatest injustice in the world? If you have an honest assessment of the toolkit that you're starting with, then you're off to a good start in figuring out how you are uniquely positioned to solve certain problems that are worth solving. So it's that internal observation, but it's also the external observation. We tell a story a lot about Spotify, right? A lot of people use Spotify, and a lot of people understand it's a video streaming service. But if you turn the clock back thousands of years and you've got people sitting around a campfire, those people are, knocking rocks together and banging sticks on trees, and they're making rhythm, and there's 10 people around a campfire. 9 of them are saying, this is great, we've got music. And there's usually one person that's saying, yeah, that's good, but if I hollow out this stick and blow in one end, it makes more music. And we can make it better. We can improve on that. And then you get into people who, you turn the clock forward and you're in the 1800s and you're sitting in these big auditoriums and you've got an orchestra playing. And everyone gets dressed up and they go to this orchestra and it's amazing. And they say, wow, look how far we've come. And 99% of the people in that audience say, how could it be better? This is beautiful. But there's always that 1% that's saying, okay, well, I had to get dressed up and I had to come down here and it was expensive and they're only playing the music that they want to play, not the music that I want to hear. So you turn the clock forward and now there's a phonograph, right? So now I can take my music, I can play whatever I want and I can put it in my home and listen to it and listen to whatever I want to hear. And in that mode, everybody says, oh, I can listen to what I want. I can do it in my house whenever I want. How could it be better? But then there's the one person that says, yeah, well, that's not so great. I wish that I didn't have to carry around a phonograph. I wish I could put music in my pocket, right? And so now you can download music and you can put it in your pocket and you can carry it around with you. And even that wasn't good enough. Now we have to stream technology. But at every one of those stages, there's always somebody that says, this is great. 99% of them say this is great. It doesn't need to get better. And they assume innovation is over. But innovation is never over. And so the person who decides to create Spotify now is streaming to your phone wherever you are, and you can listen to whatever you want, whenever you want. You don't have to buy the music. It's a subscription model. And 99% of the people in this room are saying, innovation's dead. Music industry has matured. There's nothing left to happen. But there's one person in here that's saying, yeah, we could make that better somehow. And it's really hard to imagine when you're in the moment what that one how is, but that's the magic of entrepreneurship and innovation. So look around you. Being observant means looking around and figuring out, how are things working? Where am I inefficient? Where's my productivity falling down? Where do I get frustrated? And rather than accepting those things, you look for ways of improving that. And in today's day and age, if you solve a problem for yourself, you are uniquely positioned with all of the access to global markets through the internet to take those solutions for yourself and make them available to a bigger audience. And you're going to hear Sadra talk about that today, as a matter of fact, and she's working on a presentation right now. I'm so very happy to see her. So if you take observation as another cornerstone, the next thing that you need is you need validation. And validation is not just taking one of those observations that you've made and figuring out how to solve a problem for yourself and then just trying it out. You got to validate that the idea is worth it. And that takes a little bit of energy, and it's a little bit tricky because a lot of people will take an idea and the first thing they want to go do is go talk to mom and dad and say, I'm going to go do this, or talk to my best friend and say, I'm going to go do this. And your best friend says, great, I'll support you. But that's not market data. That's not validating that the idea is good. That's validating that people love you. Validation is when you go and explore industries and figure out exactly what your ideal customer wants. And you figure out what they want by asking them questions that aren't, do you want to buy my product? It's asking them questions like what their buying patterns are and what makes up a buying decision. And it's that interaction where you figure out how important is it this problem gets solved. And if you can work with people that you haven't met before and you can validate that your idea is good, then you're off to the races. The other part of validation is that everybody who's an entrepreneur is sitting at some point staring at the ceiling and saying, I wonder if I'm any good at this, right? The doubts and the fears start to come in. If I try this, is it going to work? If I fail, am I going to be a loser? So validation is also making sure that you build a network of people around you that believe in you, and you recognize that they are a huge source of support and advice, and their networks become your networks. So validating not only your idea, but validating you as an entrepreneur is something that you need to do. That's a big component of what we do in the Center for Entrepreneurship. There are so many creative people that have so many interesting ideas, and a lot of them will come in and they'll sit in my chair and they'll close the door and they'll whisper a little bit. I want to tell you about my idea. And they're a little nervous that maybe I'm going to judge the idea or maybe it's not any good. That's not the business that the people around you who are trying to validate you are doing. We want to hear the idea. We want to support you. We want to figure out how to take that idea from where it is and get it to where you want it to be. Sometimes that requires a pivot. Sometimes you have to change your thinking a little bit, but ultimately there is a path. And if you're willing to go down that path and take advantage of the resources, then you can find the validation that you need. So after validation, the last thing is execution. And execution is where so many people fall down because it's hard when you're doing something new and for the first time. Often you're breaking new ground and you're doing it by yourself. And a lot of times you have to show that grit because there's people who might be jealous of the fact that you've decided to take a leap and try something new. They might be looking for opportunities to be the devil's advocate, right? So when you talk about execution, the thing that defines entrepreneurship is somebody who is willing to get started. It's easy to write a business plan. It's easy to do market research. It becomes increasingly difficult to do customer discovery. But getting started is the first thing. You can sit in a room for a year and fine-tune a business plan and a business model and make sure the spreadsheet's just right and make sure all your grammar is correct. It's perfect. It's formatted exactly right. But at the end of the day, all of that goes out the window after you talk to the first customer. Because the first time you have to pitch this to a customer, all that stuff is completely redefined and rescoped. So execution is important even at the early stages. There's a line in Lean Startup that says that you should be embarrassed by your first product. The first product you take to market should embarrass you. But that's good because it means you have not wasted time trying to perfect it in a world where you're going to be barraged by feedback and your whole thinking is going to get reframed in the first 30 minutes anyway. So be embarrassed. Talk to somebody who you trust enough to embarrass yourself in front of. But those engagements, getting started and trying something right at the beginning is critical for being a successful entrepreneur. So if these are the four things that we've sort of observed over the last 5 years, we've estimated that we've helped approximately 750 students and community members over the last 5 years in the Center for Entrepreneurship. These are the things that they pop up. These are the things that bubble to the surface as the most important things to know if you are exploring an idea. So when you listen to the speakers today, when you hear their stories, when you hear how they've overcome obstacles, have this context in the back of your head. And when you sit down and you do that initial self-reflection and figure out, what am I good at? What do I love doing? What do I learn without studying? What are all these things? What am I passionate about? As you're exploring these and saying, what does this mindset of mine uniquely qualify me to solve? Take some inspiration from the people who had the guts to do something with their passion and their ideas, and see if you can learn something from them. So the last thing I'll leave you with, and then we'll bring, is the technology cooperating? Okay, good. So the next thing I'll leave you with is this is, I don't know that Travis Long, I don't know if he's even any good at what he does, but this particular quote I thoroughly enjoyed. This came out in February of 2017. He said, every community has its assets and opportunities, and it is the job of entrepreneurs to perceive them, seize them, leverage them, and transform them into jobs and growth. And it's up to others to help. So that's the role we play in the Center for Entrepreneurship, is to help. So if you're in the audience and you're thinking, I think I might want to try something, please don't be shy. The Center for Entrepreneurship is something that you can explore. The Small Business and Technology Development Center is something you can explore. There are groups inside Boone that are more than welcome to engage you and to support you, but get involved and start something. So I'll leave us with a logo. And now I want to introduce our first speaker for 9:30. It's so nice to see you today. So I'll pull up Shadra's bio. Sadra, with a lifetime of plant-based experience under her belt, Sadra has some serious veg cred in the lively hub of her family's kitchen. She got into a culinary game at an early age. Later, her DIY spirit and don't give a damn punk rock attitude, combined with her high standards for quality ingredients and product performance, drove her to create No Evil Foods, the most boss plant meats on the market. Sadra stands in command of the test kitchen and develops innovative recipes drawing from world flavors inspired by her extensive travels. She passionately spearheads No Evil Foods social justice initiatives and is also a creative magician who shares the vision and communicates the voice of the company. So please welcome Sadra to the stage. Give us here.
I'm going to stand.
Okay. All right. This is how you.
No, as long as I can get up there. Whoa. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Whoa. Thank you all so much for being here in the morning and being willing to listen to what I've got to say. I'm Sadra Shadell. I'm co-founder and co-CEO of No Evil Foods. And before I get started, there's a few things you should know. The first thing is I'm mega pregnant right now, in case you couldn't tell. So a couple things happen when you're pregnant. One of them is mom brain. Any parents, mothers out there? Yeah, you know, it's real. It's like science. It's proven. So I'm probably going to cheat and look at my notes a little bit. It turns your mind to absolute mush. The other thing to know is that I've not given a talk like this in front of this many people like this before. So another reason for the notes. But also, as you're going to learn, you can't build a disruptive business and stay in your comfort zone at the same time. Use this clicker. Ta-da. So in 2014, my co-founder, Mike Woliansky, and I rolled up to a farmer's market with a cooler full of meat made from plants. We had no business plan. We had done no market testing to speak of. We had no financial projections, and we had no expectations. What we did have was a passion to do something with our lives that had purpose. We really wanted to do something that gave back to the community and find a way to really shake up the system. And you know, to be honest, we had no idea if anyone was even going to buy it. As it turns out, there were a lot of people who were very interested in buying what we were offering. So we showed up on our first day, and we've got this farmer's market booth displayed like a kind of authentic butcher shop. We've got these white aprons. We've got a big roll of craft butcher paper that we can wrap the product on site for people who were buying it from us that day. We even had the booth flanked with faux meats. So I had all these felt like ham hocks and sirloins that were like hanging all around the booth that I designed and sewed and hung up myself. And people would walk by and they'd see the sign and they'd be like, No Evil Foods, vegan butcher shop. What on earth is that? And it turned out that people were really, really responsive. And we sold out on that first day. And week after week, we went back to market and we brought more and more plant meats with us. And week after week, we continued to sell out. So, ready or not, No Evil Foods was born. Within a few months, we were on the grocery store shelves locally, including our local Whole Foods in Asheville. And it's pretty remarkable considering that we had no concept or plan or vision for being on any grocery store shelf anywhere, let alone Whole Foods. 2018 will be our last year doing farmers markets. I think next Saturday is probably our very last one. And that's because now you can find us in 47 states and thousands of retailers, including Fresh Market, Ingles, Whole Foods, Wegmans, Earth Fare here in Boone, and even Walmart. All of these retailers now have No Evil Foods brand on their shelves. So our footprint was once a single dot in Asheville, North Carolina, and now our map looks a little more like this. And in fact, there's kind of a dead zone in the middle of the country. We can't keep up with updating this location finder as fast as we're putting stores on the map. So it's evolving as we speak. But to understand how we got to where we are and how we built this brand, you need to understand the people that built it. Don't be afraid. So Mike and I met in Philadelphia in 2008. And at the time, I had no way of knowing that he would later become my business partner, my life partner, and my baby daddy times two. But looking back now, I can see that the early seeds were being planted for what our life was going to become together. At the time, I was vegetarian. He was your average omnivore. And he found that he really enjoyed eating all the food that I was feeding him. And that his perspective on what vegetarian food was and could be and what it could taste like and how it can make him feel really shifted. About a year later, our paths diverged. I actually went to South America for 7 months, inspired to learn how to farm and grow my own food and really be connected to where my food was coming from after reading books by authors like Michael Pollan. Mike, on the other hand, got on a tour bus, and he worked on tour for this guy, who some of you may or may not know. It's Billy Squire, and he was kind of a big deal back in the day. So, well, I was in South America digging into the dirt. Mike was also kind of digging into his own relationship with food. And when you're a touring musician or touring with touring musicians, your access to food can be really limited. So you're often, on a really strict per diem, $30 a day. Maybe all you get is whatever's on the rider at the club that day. It's not always very healthy. It's not always very exciting. And what Mike was finding is that the options that were available to him were sort of unappealing after learning of what he did about eating vegetarian food. And he was also finding that he was feeling really bogged down by all of the barbecue and the fried chicken and everything else that was being offered to him on tour. So he gave himself kind of a challenge. And he challenged himself to 2 weeks of vegetarianism, just to give it a shot. And what he found is that he was a believer. After 2 weeks, he found that he was much more energetic. He was feeling just lighter physically, and he also found that he didn't need to exercise as much to maintain the same weight that he had previously when he was eating meat. So when we returned from South America and the tour bus, we had no jobs. We had no apartments to go back to. And we had both found a connection with food that we didn't have before, and we really wanted to explore it. So we said goodbye to Philadelphia, and we moved to a small town in upstate New York where I grew up. And we actually moved to exactly the place where I grew up, in that we moved into my parents' basement. we were lured by the offer of cheap rent and free land to farm, and so we moved back home. And we started to learn how to grow things ourselves, and we actually started our first business together, and it was called Piratehat Farms. I use the term business really, really loosely because looking back at the business we have now, that was just like a really, really light hobby. But what we did was we were growing food not only for ourselves to eat throughout the year, but to store and preserve and ferment. But we were also selling organic produce to local farmers or local grocery stores as well. And we began making as much from scratch as we could at home. So at the time we were vegetarian. So if we wanted cheese, we made cheese. If we wanted pasta, we didn't go to the store and shake a box into a pot of boiling water. We made that puppy from scratch. We tapped our maple trees and we boiled it down on the fire in the cold and the snow for hours and turned it into sweet syrup. And we made healthcare products too. We were doing our own deodorants and our own toothpaste. We were really like opting out after discovering some of the things that we had discovered about the food system and how we were all connected to it. And one of the things we were still one of the things we were still buying in the grocery store was our proteins. And when I started to examine that in the same way and through the same lens that I was using to examine our other food and consumer choices, I found that the protein options available to me were not living up to my expectations as a passionate home cook. And they were also filled with really heavily processed ingredients that I didn't really understand how they were made, and I didn't really feel good about eating. So, I figured if I can turn water from a tree into maple syrup, and if I can make pasta from scratch, then I sure as hell can make meat make my own proteins from home as well. And that's what I did. So the very early recipes of No Evil Foods were developed in my parents' basement from ingredients that were super accessible and understandable and found in the co-op, just our local small town grocery store. In 2011, we were lured to Asheville by the promise of good food and craft beer, beautiful mountains, and a longer growing season. And then in 2014, as we mentioned earlier, a no evil revolution was born. So when it comes to Mike and I, our backgrounds are pretty different. He grew up in New Jersey. He was the grandson of a butcher, and his favorite meal as a kid was spare ribs. His parents held pretty traditional jobs. Father was an attorney or is an attorney. Mother works in healthcare. He went to traditional schoolings, public school all the way. He went to Penn State with 40,000 other students. On the other hand, I was sort of a renegade by nature, by my upbringing. I grew up in rural upstate New York. I was raised a homeschooled vegetarian. I dropped out of high school, and my parents helped facilitate me getting an online diploma so I could go to college at 16. I ended up attending a liberal arts school in Vermont that had probably, 40 students, and didn't even have grades. And even though our upbringings couldn't have been probably more different, what we had in common was punk rock. So what's punk got to do with it? That's a good question. Mike and I both discovered punk rock when we were in junior high and high school, and the music became a really big part of our lives. Mike actually was in a hardcore band for a decade, and he traveled through Europe and the United States with them. For me, I'm not a musician, but what I did find was a real sense of belonging and community in the punk scene, where I met people who were tapped into social causes in a way that I had never experienced before, and it really affected me. And for us, punk music wasn't just about fast songs and loud songs. It had its own values, and that's what we both really identified with. So I'm going to lead you through a couple of those values, because although it wasn't obvious to me at first, I did eventually start to notice a lot of overlap between entrepreneurship and punk rock and how we've approached building our brand. So the first one is do it yourself. And I think anyone in here who's had a business, run a business, talked about running a business would agree that the DIY mindset is essential to every entrepreneur. When we started out, we were a two-person team. We literally did everything ourselves. So I created the recipes. Mike and I manufactured them by hand. We designed our first website, our first logo, our first packaging, which is this here. It was brown butcher paper with a black and white label. And, that was both utilitarian in that we didn't have a color printer. And it also sort of reminded us of the black and white punk flyers that we grew up with. We also handled all of the bookkeeping at that point. We generated all of our sales leads. We designed our own marketing materials. We staffed our own farmers markets. We drove and then worked the veg fest that we were attending. And when we eventually started to grow into grocery stores and restaurants, we also physically delivered and distributed our own products to them. And in time, we learned that it's not possible, and it's also not necessary to do everything yourself. But what that DIY mindset also means is that you don't have to wait for someone to give you permission to get started and to start building something out of nothing. We also found a lot of bootstrapping in what we did. And, Punk taught us how to live affordably, and that purpose matters more than money. And we were really fortunate to begin our business at Blue Ridge Food Ventures in Asheville. It is a certified shared use kitchen facility, and it really allowed us to start our business while keeping the overhead low while we were testing the market, because if we had gone to a traditional bank, they would have laughed us out of there. And if we said, hey, we're going to make meat from plants, everybody, and take it to a farmer's market, they never would have given us any money, partially because we had no business plan and all of those other things I mentioned. But also it was just a very kind of out there idea for everyone that we explained it to. And so having access to that space was really instrumental. We also had this mindset that we will do whatever we need to do to make it work. So for us, that meant moving people into our house and taking on tenants to help make ends meet. We invested all of our money that we earned from Nuevo Foods back into Nuevo Foods and maintained other jobs on top of that to make it happen. And we worked out of a basement in our office. So when we finally did bring in an office assistant, he'd come and work in like our windowless basement where I still work today and put in the time there. So the bootstrapping mentality isn't just about necessity though, or being broke. It's also about doing the right thing for us from an ethical perspective and not, being showy with our money and spending it where we don't need to, but being really thoughtful about where we do put our money and how we're investing that into our community and into our business. So in the grocery world, this is probably something that you may not know because we didn't know when we got into the grocery world. You have to pay to play. So most major retailers usually want brands to agree to one of two things, either what's called a free fill or slotting fees. And free fills are when you literally have to give them free cases of your product in exchange for room on their shelves. The other thing is slotting fees, and that basically amounts to paying rent for shelf space. So that's a lot of cost when you think about going into a retailer like 250 Walmarts, who actually doesn't do either of those things, but let's just use them as an example. That means that if you're going into 250 Walmarts and you're got 4 products that you're entering into, that's a lot of free product to give just to get your foot in the door. And I think most businesses probably don't even question that practice. They just say, okay, that's the way it's done, that's the way it's always done. But we challenge things like that. And our VP of sales is a rock star in this department, and she is able to 9 times out of 10 bypass these accepted norms of the grocery world. And I think having that mindset of bootstrapping is really important. At the beginning, we had to sort of fight that fight because we didn't have any funds to spare to get our products on the shelves. Today, it's more about fighting corporate greed and kind of giving that a kick in the butt a little bit while still playing the game. So, they want things from us. We say, hey, let's make a deal. And it makes us feel good about what we're doing and, able to sort of still grow our business while sticking to our values at the same time. And, I think punk rock has given us that unique perspective on the business world. We also talk a lot about nonconformity and how rules are meant to be broken, right? It even says on our packaging for our Pit Boss pulled pork barbecue that rules are meant to be broken. And punk is all about being exactly who you are. It's about not being afraid to stand out. It's about constantly challenging assumed norms and the status quo. And being comfortable with that is really where disruptive ideas come from. It's not about nailing it every single time. It's not about perfection. I think it's really more about getting your ideas out there and having the drive and determination to continuously revise and revisit and tweak your ideas until you get them right. And you might have to have a little grit and a little bit of an attitude to push past your doubts and keep moving forward, because it can be really daunting sometimes. Another big thing for us is community. And if you grew up in the punk scene, it's likely that you were either in a band or you were part of a network of people who supported the bands. So the bands, they write their music, they record their own music, they press their own records, they book their own tours. If you're not on the band side, then you're probably helping them, find a place to set up their show for the night and working with the venue, which is probably like a VFW hall or a church basement. And you're also probably giving them a free meal or a place to sleep while they're on the road. Either way, you were building community. And as it turns out, it's kind of a marketing basic to build community, and it's really driven the growth of our business. For us, we've built a really amazing community of passionate early adopters on social media by being transparent and honest and vulnerable and standing up for what we believe in. And our image and our brand is a true reflection of us. It wasn't manufactured in a room by some think tank. We're not trying to be anyone that we're not. And this has allowed us to really connect with our audience. And it's kind of like when you find that new band, you're really excited and you want to tell all your friends about them, and then they get big and you're like, hey, I knew them when. And our community has adopted us in that same way. And they get so excited to tell their friends about this new brand that they found. And it's really, really cool for us to see their passion and their excitement, because we really feed off of that. And then social justice is a big thing. This is the value that really resonated with me growing up. And it's something that we really try to bake and build into our brand today. The scene I grew up in was one that welcomed everyone. It preached unity and tolerance and supported women and really welcomed everyone and encouraged us all to accept societal norms, or to challenge accepted societal norms. And when one person fell down in the pit, there were 5 hands reaching out to help that person up. And we kind of see our business that way. We want to be the hands that are reaching out to help those that need it. And we want to inspire people to make choices for positive change and to always cheer them on and applaud their efforts along the way. So our mission broadly can be summed up by do no evil. And we're really hell-bent on disrupting the food system and using food as a force for good. Our position is not always a popular one. We might lose a few followers along the way, but for us, the risk is really worth it. We didn't start this company because we wanted to sell something. We really started this company because we wanted to do something. And the risk of not speaking out for us is far too great. So we feel an obligation to our ethos to build a purpose-powered company. And at No Evil Foods, we see our mission as a sort of 3-tiered process. One of the things we're really focused on is environmental sustainability, public health, and animal welfare. So whenever a consumer purchases our plant meats, whether they're vegan or vegetarian, they're helping us to succeed in our mission, one bite at a time. And we really believe that we can go further by truly being active in the communities where our products are sold. So we stand behind our brand, we speak up, we're bold, and we're trying our best to address the greater social justice issues through selling a consumer product. For example, right now we're working with an organization in Chattanooga called Chatta Vegan. And they did a survey among their communities and they found a really, really drastic accessibility gap between um, accessibility and racial gap between who was accessing and eating vegetarian and vegan foods. And they thought that they wanted to find ways to close that gap. And so what they do is they host these family style potluck free vegan meals in underserved communities and food deserts. And they're helping to bring awareness and accessibility and close that accessibility gap. And what we do is we provide products to enable them to give these dinners. We're really helping to promote the value of plant-based diet to people who wouldn't ordinarily or may not ordinarily have access. And to us, that's really important. And it's really a way that we are standing up to the true power of our food choices. We also are very active on social media. So in the same way that a band might use a stage to bring awareness to a issue that is important to them, we're also committed to using our visibility and our reach as a brand on social media to bring awareness and speak out about issues that are important to us. We've used our platform to support abuse survivors, to speak out against our administration's border policies, to speak out as Jewish founders who are outraged at the reality that the rhetoric of our leadership emboldens racism and hate instead of tolerance. Food is political, food is a tool, and food is a vote. And you're going to be sure that we're going to use that tool any way that we can and at every opportunity. So there were a couple smart moves that we made that we didn't know we were making. The first thing was attending farmers markets and veg fests. At the time, we first went to farmers markets because we had no plan to do anything else. But it was also a very low investment way to get your product out there in front of a lot of people. And if you've ever seen Portlandia, farmers market attendees are a very vocal bunch. And so what we found is that it also allowed us to really do some market testing that we hadn't previously done. People at farmers markets are not shy to tell you what they think about your products, whether they love it or they hate it. And it provided with us a really great opportunity to hear what people were saying. And overall, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We got a couple of comments that did enable us to better our product in some ways. But overall, it was just a really great way for us to communicate on a face-to-face, one-to-one level with our consumers, to help them understand who we are, to help them understand why we're doing what we're doing. People would just come up to us and say, why make meat from plants? And even basic conversations like that, we were able to have at a very personal level. And I think that has all helped grow our brand. We're also very fortunate that we live in Asheville. And so our farmers markets see a lot of people from a lot of different areas. Excuse me. And people were coming to us from all over the country, visiting Asheville, going to the farmers market as a tourist thing to do, discovering our product and saying, wait, where can we get this in our town? And they couldn't, but it started giving us the idea that maybe one day they could. Veg Fest was another big thing. So there's these festivals that are vegetarian and vegan food festivals where vendors and t-shirt makers and all sorts of people who are mission aligned come and they sell their wares. And what we were able to do by hitting the Veg Fest circuit was tap into our group of really passionate early adopters, those people who wanted to discover us before anyone else and then wanted to share us with all of their friends. And the word of mouth was astounding. We grew our social media networks very quickly, and that really helped further the overall marketing and awareness of our brand. The other thing we touched about earlier was Blue Ridge Food Ventures. Starting a food business is not cheap. It takes a lot of money to buy equipment, to get permits, to find a space. We wouldn't have even been able to go to a bank, like I said, and get traditional funding. The way Blue Ridge Food Ventures works as a shared kitchen incubator space is that you can kind of pay as you go. So you get set up in their network. It's a pay by the hour. You rent the kitchen space. And that really allowed us to grow in a sustainable way. So at the beginning, it was just Mike and I. We were in there maybe 1 or 2 hours a week. That eventually turned into Mike and I being there 8 hours a week until 3 in the morning, some days packaging products and then getting up and going to the farmer's market the next day. We eventually added on some team members. Now we are there let's see, we run 3 shifts a week, double shifts, with about 8 people on each shift, and then we do every other Sunday. So we're there about 4 days a week running double shifts, and we've been able to, really grow, and we're currently really growing out of that space, but the ability to do that at the pace that we needed to do it was instrumental to our growth. And then the third thing that we did that we didn't realize we were doing was we listened. So like I said, when people came to farmers markets and they said, hey, we'd really like to have your products in Ohio, we said, okay. And then we reached out to independent grocery stores in Ohio, and we got our products there, and we physically direct shipped them on FedEx to get them to the grocery stores. When people said, we want to see you in grocery stores, we want to see you in Whole Foods, we said, all right. And we went and we talked to Whole Foods, and we, fought through a lengthy 6 or 8 month process to get on the shelves there. And now we're available in 5 different regions of Whole Foods across the country. And when people said, we want X product, we really take their feedback to heart. And I think that that's something we learned from punk rock, and we learned by respecting our audience and trying to build a community that a lot of businesses miss out on because they come in with their own concept of what they want to do. We didn't have a concept. We just wanted to make a product and do something cool. And so, all of that feedback we received, we really took to heart, and it really helped benefit and grow our business. Now, the professors and the administrators and the employers in the room may not look favorably on this next piece of advice, but we're going to talk a little bit about challenging authority and why it's important to building a disruptive business. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all go around with blatant disregard for the establishment, but what I do want to encourage is this. I want you to question everything. I want you to do your own thinking, to put forth your own informed decisions, to be prepared for disagreement and backlash, and to also be willing to engage with those who disagree. The fact that a company that makes meat from plants even exists with a name like No Evil Foods is controversial in and of itself. It conjures up a lot of emotion for people. It conjures up a lot of misinterpretation and assumptions by people who are wondering who we are and what we stand for. And they often make up their own minds before really hearing it out from us. But for better or for worse, it does raise eyebrows, and it often gives us an opportunity to educate our consumers on what no evil really means to us. We share a lot of fact-based articles on our social media channels about bringing awareness to the inefficiencies of raising animal products for food, or animals for foods, and the impact of animal agriculture on the environment and the threat to our public health. And we pretty boldly argue that eating more plants is one of the best things you can do to combat some of these changes and impacts. And our opinions aren't always met with a warm reception, but they do always spark conversation. Our business has grown incredibly fast over the last 4 years. And although it was Mike and I that started it, we did reach out to a lot of people for guidance along the way. And we took every single piece of advice with a big hunkin' piece of salt. We were incredibly lucky to launch in Asheville, which is an area known for being very supportive of their entrepreneurs and their small business community. And, we came from a big city, so we expected people to be really guarded with their information and kind of give us the side eye as the new business owners rolling into town, asking all these questions. And fortunately, that wasn't our experience. We were really amazed that people were very, very giving with their time and sharing their experience of what worked and didn't work for them. But, along with some of that good support and good advice, there were also people who told us that there was no market for what we were doing, that our butcher paper packaging was never going to fly in a grocery store, that no retailer would ever put that on their shelves, that our brand name was too divisive and it was no good, and that needed to be thrown out and reworked into something that was more friendly and holistic and green, that our labels were too busy and too confusing for the consumer, and that they wouldn't be able to figure out what it was that we were selling. But we ignored that advice. And when the time came to transition from our original butcher paper and black and white sticker labeling to a carton that was more durable as we started to expand to more and more retail locations, we designed a custom carton. And it was inspired by the craft beer industry and the labels that people were putting on craft beer, as well as the letterpress woodcut propaganda posters that are hanging around our house. These boxes can't be run on a box assembly line. So a lot of people said, this is never going to work. You're going to have to assemble each one of these by hand. And we do, and it works. And it's labor intensive. But what it also allows us to do is put these really cool facts inside. So each one of our boxes opens up in a very unique way that engages with our consumers and provides them with an environmental fact that gives them a big pat on the back and a high five and shows them that the value that a single plant-based meal can make. Because we ultimately, at the end of the day, want everyone to feel really good about their choices. We don't want to look our nose down at anybody. We don't want to point our fingers and come off as holier than thou. We want to educate and we want to bring people into our world in a really supportive way. And, so our first packaging was the butcher paper. We upgraded to this. People said it would never work. We went to our very first industry trade show. It's called Natural Products Expo East. It happens in Baltimore every year. Everybody in the natural industry is there. We roll up with this handmade booth that I designed and my dad helped us build. And everyone else has these massive displays that are all made of this super light stuff, and we're trucking in, 2x4s and, heavy pieces of counter. But we show up, we apply, we submit our product for these awards called the Nexties, and we win. So our product in these boxes that people told us would never work took home the coveted Nextie Award for the best new packaging innovation. Yeah, don't listen to what people tell you. They also told us that we needed to outsource our production and that we needed to co-pack, co-manufacture our products, most likely on the other side of the country in order to be successful. We wanted to be in total control of our process, as well as provide jobs for our community. And now we're a living wage certified employer that supports 25 people and families in our community. And that number is continuing to grow every month. And we're also in the final stages of building our own 16,000 square foot manufacturing facility. As I mentioned, we were busting at the seams of Blue Ridge Food Ventures, and they've been wonderfully supportive, but I think they're going to be really happy to see us go. And we're going to be really happy to move on because our team has grown, our demand has grown, and we really need the space. Our biggest concern now is that 16,000 square feet isn't going to be enough. But through all this, we really learned to trust our gut and that we know more than we think we do. And I think if you leave with nothing else today, leave with that. You know more than you think you do. Professors, employers, people will tell you things. Question it and do your own research and make up your own minds because the experts don't always know what they're talking about. Be a skeptic. Anyone that tells you that there's only one right way to do anything is not to be trusted. And in business, all rules need to be questioned. The old ways of doing things change really, really quickly, and they need to be replaced with fresh and innovative ideas and perspectives. Disruptive businesses need to lead the charge. They can't simply adapt to the change. We also encourage people to be bold. We've put a lot into growing our business, and we've sacrificed a lot to nurture it along the way. So for us, in order for us to be engaged in selling a product, which we never wanted to do, our business also had to be a way to manifest our values. From the very beginning, we approached our brand in a way that was fun for us and a way that kept us engaged. We didn't spend a lot of time sitting around and thinking, how are people going to respond to our branding? Instead, we would ask ourselves, do we like it? Do we think it's cool? Would we buy it? Because we weren't finding products that were kind of speaking to us when we went to the store. And so we were building something for us more than anything else. And, if the answer was yes to those questions, then it kind of meant that that was the right way for us to target our customers. It turned out there were a lot of other people like us who were looking for something that was a little different, that pushed the boundaries a little bit more, that was a little on the edgy side. In beer, you can do that. In food, no one was doing that at the time. And we're seeing that more and more as our company has grown. But it was pretty unique when we were starting out. When we were coming up with product names, the discussion didn't revolve around like, is this name or this name going to sell the most? It was really Mike and I brainstorming on our couch in front of the wood stove at 2 a.m. after we came home from our restaurant jobs. And that level of authenticity really ended up creating something that resonated with people in a real way. Again, it's one of those things we didn't know we were doing, but we were doing it. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't, constructed. It was just us. And it's really difficult and boring, in my opinion, to come up with something that everybody's going to like. For me, it's a lot easier and a lot more effective to just be okay with the reality that you're going to repel some people. And the people you're going to repel are the people that were never going to be into you anyway. They were never going to be into your brand. They were never going to be into your products. Our name, our attitude, our outspoken nature, our branding, all of that, our messaging can definitely repel and discourage people from following us. But the ones that are left paying attention will be our true fans. And in the end, the band Refused quoted this, and they said, we'd rather be forgotten than remembered for giving in. And I think that is kind of how our brand stands. If we don't make it, that's okay with us. But we need to know that at every step and every turn, we did it our way. And, we are okay with the choices, good or bad, however they come out. Some of the advice that we said no thanks to, maybe we should have listened to, I admit that. But some of the bigger things where we stuck to our guns and we, really pushed forward and put our foot down firmly and said, no, like this is who we are. This is how we're going to do this. This is our brand. This is the way that we want to construct our world. Those are the ideas and the things that we're going to be most proud of, whether this company succeeds down the road or not. And that's all I got. Thank you. Happy to do some question and answers for people that have them.
Thank you very much, Sadra. So we've got some roving microphones. We've got some time for Q&A. That could not have been a better intro to the Entrepreneur Summit with the messages that we just heard. So who's got a question for Sadra?
And I'm going to sit down.
First off, great story. I love it. How do you do your marketing aspects? Is it mainly the social media, or how did you get recognized by Whole Foods and all these large organizations?
Whole Foods was a unique case because we had 2 local Whole Foods stores in Asheville, and we had no idea of how the system worked. We literally walked in and were like, "Hey, we want to sell our product here." And Asheville, being what Asheville is, they had a position called the local liaison, whose job it was to kind of facilitate brands like ours who wanted to go into the store. So we got into our 2 local Whole Foods stores first, and when they accepted us with our brown butcher paper wrapping, they sold really, really well. And then the other retailers started to catch on. And the way that Whole Foods was structured at the time is that each store could individually bring in products at the store level. It's changed a little bit now, and things are handled at the larger global level, but we kind of just added stores organically one by one. We would reach out to buyers, literally lots of time on the phone, and reach out to buyers and call them and pitch our brand to them, and then they would bring us in, which was really great. Marketing for us is primarily social media. Until basically the last 6 months of this year, we had no marketing budget that we had set aside for marketing. So it was really, really bootstrapped, and it was really, really driven by organic exposure. We have still to date never done any paid advertising or radio spots or magazines or anything like that. We have generated a ton of press organically through things like winning the Nextbee Awards and just being a up-and-coming brand. There's also a huge amount of things happening in the plant-based world that have definitely helped us along. The projections for growth for plant-based foods is 6.5 billion in the next few years. So it's a hugely growing industry. And because of that, there's been a lot of major acquisitions and other things happening in that sphere. Because of that, people have had their eyes on us in a way that maybe they wouldn't have ordinarily, that we've really benefited from.
Hi, Sadra. On this end of the room over here, I come from Durham, North Carolina, where your kind of brand is very common. It's influenced our culture in the city very much. You said that you did like cooperative packaging, but there are similar brands to yours in cities like that that are typically more outlandish and can be more challenging of the status quo. Have you ever considered cooperative packaging with a similar company?
Explain more about what you mean with cooperative packaging.
So we have a different program in Durham where smaller brands can cooperatively package their brands with other brands and make larger corporate deals that give a price advantage to both smaller corporations. And they act sort of like a larger corporation in the sense that they get to save money from a product packaging perspective.
That's a really cool idea. Like I admit, we were still learning. There's still so many things. I wasn't really aware of opportunities like that, but I'd love to talk to you more about it.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm up front here, right in the middle.
Oh, hey.
Hi, sorry. Starting a business where you're really leading into a new idea, and there's sometimes not a lot of support, and it's sometimes difficult when you get a lot of pushback. People telling you should be doing stuff different ways, like you said. What are some self mantras that you use to kind of keep yourself going, especially if you can remember at the beginning, especially when it just maybe felt lonely?
Mm-hmm. It still feels very lonely, to be honest. Being an entrepreneur is a lonely life to be, especially when your business has grown at the rate that ours did. I mentioned things that we've sacrificed, and we don't see our friends anymore. Every spare minute of free time we have, we spend with our 3-year-old son. It's also difficult doing this business with your co-founder because that is your entire life. There's not a lot of separation there. So it's really lonely, but we try to reach out. We are part of a variety of mentorship programs in the Asheville area that we don't attend as much as we would like to. We rarely get to actually go. But knowing that those networks are there has been really important. Being able to reach out to people via email when you have questions and get support that way has been really helpful. As far as mantras, things are getting tougher when you can't get the top off the bottom of the barrel, right? So that's a lyric that I have loved since 8th grade. And it's not inspiring, but it just means that you just got to keep trudging forward. Another one is let the tiger eat you. You kind of have to give in to a certain risk. You can only fight so much. So you put up your best effort, and you just have to be okay with how things go. And you're going to get knocked down. And if you get knocked down, you just have to look for those hands reaching out to you in the pit to lift you back up because they're out there. So look for the helpers.
First and foremost, thanks for the story. That was really awesome, and I'm really excited for you and the future of your company. I'm glad you haven't changed the motto of what you started with. Second, I would like to know what is your inventory turnover? Like, how long do you usually keep your inventory, and how has your growth of sales grown over the past 4 years?
Inventory goes out as quick as we can get it in. So we basically have 0 inventory on hand at any given time. You might walk into our cooler right now and have 3 pallets, but they're probably scheduled to go out on Monday. So our biggest problem right now is keeping up with the demand and being able to manufacture as quickly as we can. We anticipated being in our new facility in April of this year, and then it got pushed back to August. And then we thought we'd be there around Thanksgiving, and now it looks like we are going to be there in late January. So, things happen that you can't predict, and it sucks, but you have to look for ways to create efficiencies. So basically, we create as much product as we possibly can. Instead of having inventory holding on site, we have fill rate problems. So, our fill rates aren't where we would like them to be as far as fulfilling the orders that are coming in. What was the second part of your question?
How has your rate of growth been over the past 4 years?
Past 4 years, it's been astronomical. I can tell you last year over this year, we're growing at about 300%. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. First off, I wanted to say I'm a big fan of your product. I actually accidentally tried it in the restaurant one time, and I almost sent it back because I thought that they had served me real meat. And I'm definitely looking forward to ordering the pardon
Nice.
this
Order it soon,
Thanksgiving.
it's going fast.
Yeah, I know. I'm ordering it today. It was actually one of the things that kind of showed me that I didn't have to give up a lot of things to become vegetarian or now vegan. And so I wanted to ask, I know you do a lot of veg fests and things like that that are targeted at people that already eat alternative meats or plant-based diets, but do you do any outreach with people who aren't eating meat to show them that the transition doesn't have to be hard, that they don't have to give up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because when you look at the population overall of vegans and vegetarians nationwide or worldwide, it's a really small number. It's a very passionate, vocal, outspoken number, but it's really small. And so we do realize that the opportunity for growth for our brand is in reaching those other people, the flexitarians, the omnivores, because there's much more room for growth. We do lots of grocery store demos, and I think right now, because our marketing budget has been so small, that's been our primary source of reaching those types, that audience. And we don't lead with, hey, come over here and try our vegan meat, because no one's going to come to our table. We realize that. It's got a stigma. It's, people have tried it before. It wasn't good. We're doing something different. And, once we get the food into their mouth, they're also believers. So what we do is we say, hey, you want some samples of some pulled pork barbecue? And they come over, they try it, and they're like, wow, that's really good. And we say, great, that's entirely made from plants. They're like, wait, what did you just say? And you can just see their minds like shooting off of their, their necks or their heads exploding. And they try the chicken. They say, wait a second. So that wasn't actual chicken. And so that's how we're reaching that market right now. And it really is tasting is believing. So we're looking for more opportunities. We have some ideas for 2019 where we're going to do some more strategic campaigns to reach those people and tap into audiences that may not have, your stereotypical construction workers or, places that you just, business people in downtown Charlotte in the banking, district that wouldn't typically eat our food. And we're going to try to get our food into their mouth and make them believers too.
Yeah, so but scaling your business, as you talked about your 16,000 foot facility that you bring on, did you have to bring on partners or take on debt? And if you did any of that, what was your thought process in doing that?
Yeah, the first 2.5 years was entirely funded on $5,000 that Mike and I contributed to the business ourselves and then reinvested into the business. After about 2.5 years, we did bring on a very small minority partner, very small, who did provide a little bit of financial backing and a lot of networking and connections to the industry, which have really helped further our growth. She was previously working with Honest Tea, and she now serves as our director of strategy and will be transitioning to a chair of the board position with us. This year, we just completed our very first fundraising round, and we did a seed round. It was friends and family, and we did it all through convertible debt. So how that worked for us is that we didn't have to evaluate our company at the stage of growth that we are at right now, which really helped us maintain more of our equity to ourselves, for now. When we go into our Series A round, which we're looking at doing in late 2019, that's when we'll evaluate. And because we've grown at such rates from when we closed our seed round to when we'll be closing our Series A, we'll be able to be valued at a much greater valuation. And so that was one way to protect our assets in the company while also having the working capital to continue to grow.
Hi. So I'm with Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture, and I found your story very inspiring. The authenticity of it all, we're really dedicated to strengthening this local food system here in the High Country. And so thank you for what you're doing. I have two questions. The first one is about, increasing your scale. Have you found it challenging to stay true to maybe the sourcing of your ingredients? And have you found that challenging? The second question is related to something we're trying to do we're running an online farmers market to try to support local farmers and food entrepreneurs. And I'd just be curious to hear your advice for support organizations like us and how we can ensure that, small scale food entrepreneurs can find the success they're looking for.
Good questions, thanks. As far as ingredient sourcing, we typically don't use a lot of fresh produce. So we're not actually sourcing from local farmers. Because of the scale that we are at, it does make it really difficult for us. We're not organic certified, we're completely non-GMO, but we also do include a lot of organic ingredients. Some of those we strategically actually source from much, much farther away. The wheat protein that we use in our product, we actually source from Europe because their standards on glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup, which is really, really heavily used on crops in the US and Canada, is much more restricted over there. And while it's not organic, it is a pesticide-free wheat, which we can't get in our area. So for that reason, we're strategically going further away. As far as being a resource, I think being organized is the best thing, like the best advice. I think part of our growth was because Mike and I were so on top of everything. We would respond to emails in 24 hours, or less, usually less. We would constantly follow up with, people that we've reached out to generate sales leads. We were just on it all the time. And I think that one thing I've noticed being a business owner and working with other businesses in the Asheville and Western North Carolina area is that most people have a more laid back approach than we do, which is totally fine. But it's not like, it's just not our mentality. We're go, go, go. And it was frustrating at times to work with other organizations and to partner with them because we weren't at the same place. So I think be that business and that community resource that surprises people with your accessibility and surprises people with your response time and surprises people with your organization and attention to detail. And I think that's how you can really benefit the community.
Hi, I'm Jim, right here. She asked a question about sourcing that I was going to ask, but the other question is, what is your intellectual property and how do you protect it? Is it in the recipes? Is it in the processing? And what have you done to protect that?
I would say it's more, what we're doing isn't really that complex, to be completely honest. They were, again, developed in a basement kitchen without specialized equipment. We weren't using high moisture extruders. We're not doing any, gimmick processes. We're not creating food in a laboratory out of cells harvested from some root of some ancient plant. It really is basic ingredients that we found from our co-op. So, anyone can do it, to be really, really honest. There are some things that we have hit on as far as technique and process that are proprietary to help getting our texture the way that it is, which is, I think, a big, big part to making a alternative to meat taste as good as meat. And as far as protecting that, it's a risk. Because our process is so simple, if a big corporation wanted to reverse engineer our products, they could do it. What we have going for us is our brand. People can't replicate that. People can't replicate Mike and myself. We wish that we could. We would love to be able to multiply ourselves, but we can't. And I think that is the thing that no one can really take from us. So the rest, we just have to kind of put it out there. Our team members do sign NDAs. We do take precautions as we can. But again, it's not a really scientific process. You just have to kind of trust and keep going forward.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I'm Tammy Kowalczyk. We're going to talk later. I wanted to, about the supply chain issue. Have you thought about, or are there plans for growing your own supplies?
We're not. I mean, at the rate of growth, taking on anything additional to what we're already doing and trying to manage or facilitate, growth or properties to grow or farm and harvest. There's so much to do as far as that goes, from regulation standpoints and just management standpoints, financial, to find the land, climatic, all of that I think it's just not something that we're going to get into. We would love to one day for maybe a special product partner with some local farmers or a network of farmers so that product can maybe be a seasonal release that we don't need quite as much quantity of all the time. Once we get into our new facility, it will open up the opportunity for us to do a lot more seasonal releases and small batches, and also increase our product offerings overall, which we just haven't had the ability to do in the restrictions of our space. So we want to do that. That's part of what we want to do. It's just that we haven't been able to do it yet. At the beginning, we really wanted to come to farmers markets and be more like a butcher shop with a different variety every week. And then we just took off so quickly that, we just had so much trouble keeping up with our existing products that we haven't had time to innovate. So it's coming, hopefully.
And that might really encourage new entrepreneurship,
Yeah,
is getting into your supply chain.
I agree.
So what are your long-term plans for the company? A lot of, startups want to go public, they want to be acquired, some maintain, private status. And how do you mesh that without compromising what your brand stands for, what you stand for? What are your plans around that?
I think right now we just are trying to ride the wave of our growth and keep doing it as closely to our values as we can, and build the best business that we can. If that's attractive to someone someday, we'll explore that possibility, but it would really have to be the right partner who continues to represent our values. We said earlier that, purpose is more powerful than money for us. And, don't quote me on that. One day, who knows, but we are really trying to just build a business that we believe in and do right by our community. We've recently gotten our women-owned business certification. In addition to being living wage certified, we're going to start offering wellness benefits for our team in 2019. So we're just trying to incrementally do no evil in a variety of different facets. And, whatever that ends up being someday is great, but we're trying to build a business that we can believe in first and foremost.
Thank you, Sadra. So one last question, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. You've got students sitting in here, some in high school, some in college, and you seem to be extraordinarily self-aware and you march to your own drummer. But is there one thing you wish you knew when you were their age?
Whew, there's a lot of things I wish I knew when I was their age. A whole lot. You're probably not as awkward as you feel. Or maybe you are, but that's also your strength. It took me a long time to kind of fall into my own skin and, shake that ugly duckling vibe that I had. But I think especially when our business started to take off and I was able to leave our jobs that kept me having to look a certain way or fit a certain mold, that really gave me a lot of kind of inspiration and a lot of confidence. And so that part is always in you. You might have to kind of shrink it down sometimes, and it sucks when you do, but push through it. Don't let the world grind you down and shape you into something that you're not. Find the opportunities to be who you are and the opportunities to, highlight and, give benefit to that person, because that unique awkwardness, that is uniquely you. So try to harness that the best you can.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very, very much. That was a perfect opening session for our summit. I want to make one quick introduction and thank you that I wasn't able to make at 9. Carole McLeod was not able to be here right at 9. And as you know, this is the Carole McLeod Entrepreneur Summit. So I just want to take a minute and say thank you to Carole, who's in the back. Would you stand up and say hello? So Carole has supported this summit for 15 years, and we could not have done this without her. So thank you, and we're glad you're here. Our next session is we called it 30 Years of Startup, a startup forged in Boone. 34 years ago, Art and Susan Barber, they're former Appalachian State University students, they started Charleston Forge, a Boone-based furniture manufacturer. The Barbers both grew up in Winston-Salem. They started dating while attending high school. Then they came to Appalachian State and proceeded to marry in 1972, while Susan was a sophomore and Art was a senior. With a $9,000 loan from friends, they started their own business. 1 year after graduation, evolved from a small 1,000-square-foot retail store into a manufacturing operation encompassing more than 250,000 square feet and employing more than 250 people. Its products have been shipped throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe to some of the most prestigious customers in the world. Their story is an incredible example of determination, passion, pride, gambles and sacrifices, and success beyond their wildest dreams. So I want to welcome up Art and Susan Barber, and it looks like Susan's getting amped. You're getting mic'd?
I think I might.
There you go. Okay. Art and Susan Barber. You want to stand here? Forward and back.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us to come be here today and share our story with you. It's a pretty incredible story because we were fortunate to build a good business at a very young age, enjoy the rewards. Then we experienced it crashing, and we were put in a total survival mode. We then experienced the struggles and challenges of learning from our mistakes and building it again, only better the second time. And it was very tricky for us. We're the elders in the presentation model today, we realized. So
but we're having just as much fun.
we're still having fun. And when we tried to take our story, we have so many good stories, but when we tried to consolidate it and, figure out what needs to be told and what we need to maybe not tell, it's been a challenge this week. As Eric just said, we were high school sweethearts, and we both came here to attend Appalachian. We got married way too young. We don't fit the mold for today at all. We never have fit a mold. I was 19 and he was 20 when we got married. And we've been married 46 years. And I must say, thank you.
She got real lucky.
And after going through what we have put together for our presentation this week and trying to figure out what format to follow, who was going to speak, how we were going to do it, I'm really about to decide this could be our last.
Thanks a lot.
This presentation is going to be more conversational. It's just the way we are. So bear with us. We do have some order to it, but we're going to make it up as we go along, a lot of it. So fast, but you've already shown the big building. Okay, so you've already seen where we are today. That is a far cry from where we started. This is in the industrial park here in Boone. Then the next picture shows us all those years ago, long time ago.
I got a haircut.
You did, you got a haircut. So then some of the next pictures, we're fast forwarding, and then we'll go back and get into the history a little bit more. But our core business is to make furniture that is sold to higher end furniture stores and interior designers. And we sell all over the United States. We've sold in Europe, we sell in Canada. But along with that, we make custom furniture for contract and hospitality accounts, such as restaurants, hotels, resorts, assisted living facilities, and we've got a few celebrities along the way. So just to throw out some of the ones that we've done, the Benton Convention Center, this is a recent one, a couple of years ago, that's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They did a renovation, huge renovation, and this is their conference table. Tell them about the conference table.
What's amazing about this conference table is the architect specified that there could only be 5 pieces of wood to make this top. The top is 26 feet long and 5 feet wide. So a friend of ours named Bob Timberlake, who some of you may know, helped us find a 400-year-old beam that came out of a cotton mill down in South Carolina, and we sliced up that beam. Each one of those each one of those boards is 12 inches wide, and there's 5 of them in there to make that top. So it's pretty incredible to be able to find a piece of wood like that and make a top like that.
Why don't you,
You can see the happy customer down in the bottom there.
so why don't you go ahead and tell them about the next slide? That's a fun story.
This is a fun story. We had no idea, when we started watching the Sochi Olympics, we're old, so we started to go to bed early. It was a Saturday night. And as I went up to turn the TV off, I saw that table, and I grabbed my cell phone and I took a picture of it real quick. And I said, is somebody copying our furniture, or what's going on here? So I got to the office Monday morning, and I asked the girls in the office in our customer service department, did anybody know anything about a table going to the Sochi Olympics? And sure enough, that was our table, and it was on just about every night of the Winter Olympics that year. So that was a pretty special. I'm going to tell you a funny story about it, though. We sent out a press release saying that NBC Sports has endorsed Charleston Forge's table or something, and from Sochi, we got a letter saying cease and desist, because they didn't endorse it, they just used it, So.
Okay, and then some other names. I'll just scroll through these fast, but Disney World, the Ritz-Carlton, the Marriott headquarters, and the Marriott in Times Square. Rooster's Restaurants in Charlotte, North Carolina, any of you that may be from Charlotte. We actually built light fixtures for one of their restaurants, and the 2 huge wine racks that they use, big, massive, floor-to-ceiling wine racks. Here locally, Pepper's Restaurant, when they opened up the bar, we built the bar stools and also did the tables, or at least the table bases for the bars. And then a couple of people that have our beds, John Travolta, Mariah Carey, to name a few. But we also have our largest customer right now is a name that I'm sure all of you will recognize. We're selling currently to Starbucks and have been for about the last 3 years. So what we provide them with at this point are the long community tables. There's a photo of one. And we also built the community table for the Starbucks that recently opened here in Boone. So you can walk right in there and have a seat at it if you'd like. Just a little bit about us personally. We have 2 grown children with families of their own. Daughter Jamie still lives in Boone, and our son Brandon has relocated to Charleston, South Carolina with his family. But between them, they've given us 7 beautiful grandchildren. And even with all of our story and all of our history, I just have to say that the job titles that we are enjoying the most right now are Nanny and Artie to our 7 grandchildren. They range in age from 1 to 13. So what we thought we might do is maybe hit the highlights of our journey, try not to go into too much detail, and then we'll go back and fill in with some stories. So one of the things you asked us to share with you was what gave us the idea to go into business. So I'm going to let Art tell how we ended up with the retail business in 1974.
I've got to back all the way up. I came up here on a track and cross-country scholarship back in 1969. When I say a scholarship, that meant $130 every 3 months. Sorry. That was big money back in those days, especially for me, who didn't come from a family of money. And I think it's important that you know that neither one of us came from a family of money. This was what we have was generated by us with the support of our families. My father was a traveling paint salesman, and my mother was a school secretary. And Susan's father sold plumbing supplies in a retail store. So pretty humble beginnings there for us. There were 5 in my family. We had a 1-bedroom house in Winston-Salem, and the same story with Susan, only 4 in the house, but pretty humble beginnings. So this is ultra exciting. It still is today. And I think what you're going to hear is just a reinforcement of what Eric and Sandra have said already. The entrepreneurial spirit and the charts that they put up here earlier, ours are the same. it was fun sitting there watching and just feeling the commonality of all of us. I came up here on that scholarship and ran track for a short time. And I got drafted from I'm going to make a long story short here. I was running track, and I got frustrated with running track, so I gave it up. And the fact that I was a runner, there was a coach at Appalachian who was trying to build a soccer team, Eric DeGroat. I don't know if any of you in this room are as old as we are and can remember Eric DeGroat, but he wanted to build a soccer team. So some of us got recruited out of our PE classes, and I was a runner, so he wanted me on his team. Never had kicked a soccer ball in my life and didn't know the first thing about it. But I did play for Appalachian in the early stages. I ended up with 3 concussions, and I had to quit. Back in those days when it rained and those hard leather balls, if you headed one of those balls, man, you got hurt. So after 3 concussions, I had to quit, and it was about the same time that I was in the business classes here, and I did an internship at what used to be the real Farmers Hardware downtown. It's a community type store now, as you know, but it was a genuine, wonderful old hardware store back in the day. And the owner of the store put me in charge of the fireplace department in the summertime. Did you hear that? Thank you. He knew I'd had those concussions, and he thought that was the best place for me. And the truth is, and this is something you need to understand, back in those days, there were, and you people have to understand the younger people and your newbies to the community. This is a community of some prestigious people scattered out there in developments that you may not even know about. When we were coming along, the only 2 ritzy developments in the community were Grandfather Mountain and Hound Deers. We got in on the ground floor of all the other developments, Elk River, Linville Ridge, and all that. And occupants of those neighborhoods are people like Don Shula, who you may remember as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, Bob Greasy. We made a fire screen a long time ago for Jack Nicklaus and a fire screen for General William Westmoreland back in the Vietnam days. But I did that. The reason that he put me in charge of the fireplace shop in the summertime was because the developments were going up and the people with the money were coming from out of town, from Florida, especially Florida. And if the temperature got down to, 60 or 70 degrees, that's summertime to us. If you're coming up here out of Florida, that's pretty cool weather. So there was a lot of development going on and a lot of fireplace equipment being sold back in the day. What I noticed was that we would sell some fireplace equipment, and in a few weeks after the people used it, it would come back and be broken, and they were upset. That spawned the idea for us as after we graduated. We had no idea what we wanted to do with our lives before I did that internship at Farmers Hardware. This is not a dream come true story. It's a story of recognizing an opportunity and then pursuing that opportunity with a passion, and that's what we did. We studied. We didn't have the access to the internet back in those days, or there was no such thing. But we did research on trying to find the best quality of fireplace equipment that we could possibly find. Long story short, we did it. We identified some suppliers of. Did I lose it? Suppliers of. You could go down to Lowe's Hardware and buy a fire screen that had brass plated frame around it. Ours was solid brass. You could go down to Lowe's and buy a fire screen for $99. Glass enclosure is what I'm talking about. You could go down to Lowe's and buy one for $99.95. Ours were well over $300. We were able to sell those fire screens because of the displays that we built in our little store. But I would walk up and somebody would say, well, you can go to Lowe's and buy one for $99.95. Why is yours over $300? And I'd walk up and kick it just as hard as I could. And I said, if you can go down to Lowe's and kick theirs in the glass and not break it, you should buy it. Of course, they never did that. They bought ours.
But our business then was, we were right there together. It was very personal. A lot of times when we were selling a fire screen, people would say, oh, it's a standard size. Well, I'm here to tell you there is no standard size fireplace, especially not up here with all the rock fireplaces and the big sizes and everything. So in a nutshell, when we would go out would measure. And a lot of times we'd do it in the evenings together. At that time, we didn't have the children. And we ended up from our suppliers having to order custom-made fire screens because of our fireplaces up here. So that fact is the beginning kernel that got us into the metal furniture business, because Art, being Mr. Entrepreneur, he's never been able to help himself as far as that goes. And the neighbor across the street just happened to be a welder from our store. So he taught this guy into teaching him how to weld. And next thing we knew, we were making very simple, handmade, custom-made fire screens. So that was our very beginning in a very small way to start with manufacturing. So our little store just grew. It grew a lot by word of mouth because, as he said, the business was booming. The second market business was booming at that time. And so we worked with a lot of contractors who they might be doing condominiums in a certain building. And so they would mention us to their client and say, well, we can have these people come and measure your fireplace. They'll have your dimensions on file. When you get ready to pick out what you want, you just go see them, and they've got all the information. They can give you a quote. Well, it was word of mouth. So we took care of one customer, and their neighbors came in the next week, and then the next neighbors. And then all it took was the open house cocktail party. Here we went. So the next thing that happened, I mean, this business was successful. So several years into the business,
Here you are.
I'm going to talk about the patio furniture.
That's
We need
right.
to move
That's
on
where I
with.
was going. Go for it.
Okay. So once again, unlike what I hope you don't do, we did not have a business plan. But Art thought that we should start manufacturing outdoor furniture. So he takes off to Dallas, Texas. He had talked to somebody, I guess it was Dallas, and ended up buying what looked like a big, massive pile of metal. It made absolutely no sense. It arrived on a truck, was dumped out in the parking lot.
She's talking about
It sat
equipment.
there for 3 months because we didn't have a clue what to do with it. And we were going to
Let me
manufacture
clarify
outdoor
this just a little
furniture.
bit. Let me clarify this
Go
just a
for
little
it.
bit. Imagine we had the fireplace shop took off. We were given excellent customer service, on time, in time, a good price for what we were doing. We just took off as 20-year-olds. We're just going like nobody's business. And as a ignorant 20-year-old, you think you've got the world right where you want it. We wanted to grow and expand our business. So to take it from just a fireplace shop, we wanted to create a fireplace and patio shop.
Right.
Well, there was a trade show. There was a trade show out in Dallas, Texas, and I drove my 1978 Toyota pickup truck out there, loaded with some fireplace equipment on it, and I was going to put the equipment, the stuff we were selling, and I was making in this 10 by 10 booth. And this man from Dallas, Texas, who had a huge store out there, I knew nothing about this at the time. It was Freed's Furniture, if there's anybody in here from Dallas, Texas. Mr. Freed walks up to me and he says, I buy 20 train car loads of wrought iron furniture out of North Carolina every year. And I've got a brother out here in Austin, I think, who's got some equipment that he's not using anymore. If you'll set that equipment up out here in Dallas, I'll buy my 20 train car loads of furniture from you every year. Well, I didn't want to move to Dallas at that time. I might now. But,
No, we like it here.
I came back home and told Susan I was going to go to the bank and borrow a bunch of money. Asked Susan if I could go to the bank and borrow a bunch of money.
That was one of those early morning board meetings
And
we
this is
used to
part of the
have.
story that you'll see up here in just a minute. But we bought that equipment. Had a friend here in town who had a tractor trailer truck. He went out there with me. We loaded up that equipment for making outdoor furniture, and we brought it back here, set it in the parking lot of this building that we had. And then I realized I don't know the first thing about setting that equipment up or how to manage production or anything else. So as the story goes on, you'll hear that we got ourselves over $300,000 in debt back in 1980 something, which in today's dollars is like $1 million or more. So that's the real part of that story.
That's the real part of that story. So this was the first downward part of the story, where we realized that at a very young age, we owed a whole lot of money, both to the bank and to our suppliers. So what we had to do was stop and say, okay, outdoor furniture isn't really where we need to be because it doesn't sell year round. It's a short season. You've got to carry your business on the off months and get ready for the selling season. It was not the smartest thing we've ever done. So anyway.
Goes back to the concussions.
So Art said, maybe what we need to do is make indoor furniture. And so he started playing around with, welding up shapes and putting things together and came up with the very first products for the beginnings of Charleston Forge as it was started in the early 80s. So those were our first products. Very, very simple. We didn't like the name baker's racks, so we came up with the name wall units, and that's what we call them. That's really the beginning of Charleston Forge back in the early 80s.
When we were trying to make the outdoor furniture, the piece in the middle is a baker's rack. And if you imagine on your patio, you've got that with metal shelves and you set your plants and stuff on it. When we started the transition to indoor, I had a local fella make some oak shelves, which are shown on these. And these are line drawings done by a friend of ours back in the day. We didn't have fancy photography and all that. I went around the house. If you look up on the top post of the baker's racks, you can see what our little brass finials. I would go around our house and steal the finials off of her lamps. And that was the decoration that was on the top post of the baker's racks. And what really happened, we need to speed this along because we're going to run out of time. But we started that transition. I made a baker's rack. I put it in the fireplace shop, and lucky for us, and you will soon understand that we're some of the luckiest people you'll ever want to talk to or see or meet or whatever. But as our luck would have it, this man who was teaching here at the university came in the fireplace shop, and he saw the beautiful baker's racks. And he said, that's wonderful. Why don't you take that and put it in the world's largest furniture market, which is in High Point, North Carolina. Over 10 million square feet. 70,000 people come twice a year to buy furniture down there. And I said, well, we don't know the first thing about the furniture market. This is all I know about making furniture. I mean, what are we going to do? He says, well, I'm going to get you a space down there. Keep in mind, we're $300,000 in debt and desperate. He said, I'll get you into somebody's showroom in High Point. You make up some pieces. And that's what we had. And I didn't understand the whole thing, so I got down to High Point the night before the show opened. Keep in mind, this is world's largest furniture market. I get there at 9 o'clock the night before the show is open, and the girl who was decorating the showroom we were supposed to be in, she says, "I'm sorry, it's too late. I've already got the showroom decorated. You can't put your product in here. $300,000 in debt." I got to do something, so I paced up and down the hall and thought, what am I going to do? And am I getting ahead of myself here?
No, just tell that and then we'll go to the next screen and start.
Now you see why we're a team.
Presentations. Can you tell? That's what we need.
That's what we need. All right, so we're going to jump right into this. We're going to jump right into these. Eric asked us to share with you what we've learned over the years, and we tried to do this in such a form that it might keep you awake. Up at the top it says, "Don't be ordinary, be very special." If you can imagine what I did at that furniture market, I walked up and down the hall for a little while, and I decided I am going to show my furniture in the world's largest furniture market, come hell or high waters. So I found a guy who was selling rugs, and I borrowed a rug, and I set the rug down in the hall, and I put my 5 pieces of furniture on that rug. Didn't ask permission, didn't pay any rent. Stood there for 10 days of that furniture market, and we wrote 14 orders. And if you can imagine, one of the orders that we wrote was with Spiegel Catalog, and people don't remember Spiegel Catalog, but it's like selling to Amazon. We ended up on the inside front cover of Spiegel Catalog 6 months later, and off we went again. From the fireplace shop went like that, and then we crashed because stupidity, and then we went right back. We started right back up again. And we put up there, don't be ordinary, do something like that. You know, the grit that we talked about earlier, the adventure. I mean, it was crazy and we had the best time down there. I'll slip in here and say that once we finally did get our own permanent showroom down there, we rented 1,000 square feet. And the first party that we had, we thought we're big executives now, so we're going to have a party and invite people. Keep in mind, standing out there in the hall, you meet the customers, but you also meet the janitors and the window washers and people like that. And they're saying, what are you doing out here in the hall when everybody else has got a showroom? So we made a lot of friends of those type people. When we had our first party, we brought in barbecue and beer, and we didn't invite a single customer. We invited those support staff of that building. I can drive a truck down there today and back it up to the dock 34 years later, and those people will come and help me unload the truck. So, you know, doing stuff like that is what we mean by don't be ordinary.
I want to fast forward and give them an overview before we finish this, just so they kind of know how we ended up here.
Go for it.
Okay, so now you know that we illegally entered the High Point furniture market. We didn't mean to, it just happened.
There's a concussion again.
But I will tell you that we more than paid our share of rent for the next years.
Let me interject right there, just so you'll understand. 20 some years ago, we eventually got the showroom. We grew the showroom to be 5,000 square feet. Our rent for 5,000 square feet was $70,000. It's only open 20 days out of the year. 20 days for $70,000. That's, you know, it goes back to how crazy was that to slip in there and accomplish something like what we did. Excuse me.
No, it's okay. But even then, in later years, the owners of Market Square, which is where we were for quite a few years, we would be working in our showroom and hear their entourage as they're coming through showing, they're trying to sell showroom space to other manufacturers. And we heard him on more than one occasion say, see this little company right here? I helped them get started. So, you know, it all worked out. We didn't get arrested. But just to really fast forward, over the next 20 years, our growth was just like this. It just kept going just like that, year after year. At about 20 years later, here we were. It reached the point where we were struggling to keep up with the demand for our products, and we couldn't figure out the best way to increase our production fast enough. And in the height, before we went down again, we had 5 locations, and at sometimes we were up to 250 employees. So that's a lot of overhead to manage. We traveled to Europe. Some of that we'll hit on when we go through our little checklist. So I'm really skimming over this fast. Then in 2001, the perfect storm started to happen, and it hit us earlier than it did other businesses, which came on closer to 2008. But we go back and think, okay, 9/11 happened. We had worked with the bank to get a loan. We had hired a contractor. We had plans to do a huge addition to our building, which we showed you a picture of a minute ago. We were going to add production space, office space. I mean, we had plans to just keep on growing. 9/11 happened. The market started being flooded with Asian imports. Our products were very simple, so it was easy for them to be copied, and they were much cheaper than what we could produce them. So it happened so quickly where one day we're like on top of the world, and then we start to watch our sales and our profits just go right down. And probably the lowest point was about 2005, where we were just, it just happened so fast. So why don't you jump in and just try to do the overview, and then we'll go through our little things. So we started asking for help again. We needed help.
Go ahead.
looking back on it, we did not react quickly enough to reducing our workforce and reducing the number of facilities we had. That was a mistake. We should have been aware of that much sooner and taken action.
Let me interject. The reason we didn't do that, I was the president of the company at the time, and so I take full responsibility. It's heartbreaking to lay people off, and I didn't want to do it. I thought, we're a great company. We're in a great area. We've got a great product. We do a good job of taking care of our customers. They enjoy doing business with us. And America is a great country. This is a terrible, terrible tragedy. I'm speaking about 9/11. The world kind of just stopped right there, and I thought, it's going to come back. We'll be all right. Time heals. It didn't come back. That was like the beginning of the downfall of the worst recession in our memory. Most of your memories too, I think. Any of those that were around in the Great Depression, I don't think are here with us, but that's the reason that we didn't react so quickly. I have to tell you that I have to live with the idea that we laid off 200 people. We had to cut ourselves down to 50, but we survived, and there's so many people in the furniture industry who didn't survive. So we can take great credit in that. What we did was we closed down some of our buildings. We laid off those people. We started to simplify our product line. We had over 400 pieces in our product line at that time, and it was too hard to manage all of that inventory and production. We simplified ourselves, took a deep breath, and realized that we're going to go through some pretty rough times until we find that market who appreciates American-made products. We had been to Europe. You'll hear part of the story up here in just a minute, that we had gone to Europe and we had already been importing some products. They were coming from Europe instead of China or Mexico or somewhere else. But we knew the challenges before everybody started going to Asia and doing the import thing. We knew that there was a market of people who would appreciate the quality of product that we make. We just had to hang on long enough to find that market. One way we found that market, I'm going to fast forward, and this is not even in our notes, but thank goodness the internet and social media and the free advertising that you were talking about. We were lucky enough to find a lady who's in this audience right here filming us right now. Karen Lehman was a wedding photographer, and when she heard about our plight and the fact that we're trying to remain American made product and rebuild this thing and keep people in jobs, she quit doing her wedding photography business and came to us and manages our social media. She'll tell you later about, please get on Instagram and follow us on Facebook and all that.
And then along the way, we were reaching out, looking for some help. We realized we really needed help. And met this guy that we had not known previously. Art actually met him somewhere down at the furniture market. And he tried to send some people our way. That part didn't really work out. And finally, he said, I'm going to come up and meet with you. Well, I just want to see if there might be something I can do to help you. He said, I know of your company. I know you still have a good reputation. The word is out there that you're struggling. It's no secret in the industry. I think I'll just come up and see you. And so this man has been our partner since 2009. His name's Rick Grant. He came on board with us. And, you started a company. It's just been the two of us for all of these years. We've been through every single part of doing the company, just us, making the decisions ourselves, for better, for worse. And we realized that we needed help. So I think maybe you can imagine how it felt all of a sudden to have another person who had just as much decision-making power as we did. I am here to tell you that it has been one of the best things that's ever happened to us, and it's been one of the best partnerships you could ever dream of. With Rick's help, we were able to step back for one thing, and take a hard look at what do we have? What are our products? What do we think we need to do to turn this company around? And it was a long process. It took quite a few years. Both families had put money into the company to keep it going. But here we are. We struggled for those years, and every year it's gotten a little bit better and a little bit better. And now we've grown some more. We're up to about 80 some people now, but we still don't ever want to get big again. We only have one location. Our furniture is made here. We don't do the importing thing anymore and haven't for quite a few years. Our products have evolved. They look entirely different than those first line drawings. Just to give you a few ideas of things we make now.
Let's jump into our big
Okay.
talking points here, because I'm watching the time.
Mhm.
Going back to don't be ordinary, be very special. I told you the story about standing out in the hall. The other thing we did, some of you will remember when we signed the free trade agreement with the NAFTA free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada and all the first time around. We saw everybody, a lot of manufacturers heading to Mexico for cheap labor. And when we don't do ordinary, Susan and I headed to Europe. We were lucky enough, I told you we were lucky before, but we were lucky enough to meet some people who invited me to come over to Europe and look at production in the eastern part of the country over there. Long story short, we ended up in Prague. We actually established a friendship with a small manufacturing company over in Prague, and they started hammering out component parts for us over there. So we imported component parts from Prague for about 10 years. There's a little bit more to the Prague story, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But next one is don't be too proud to ask for help, especially if your toilet freezes. Going back to the hard times of the fireplace shop and then the transition period when we had bought all that equipment and got ourselves way in debt and didn't have the sales to support the debt. I'll never forget, I was sitting in my little cinder block office up on the west side of town, and I was sitting there. It was a cold winter morning. I had on a goose down jacket and goose down gloves. I had on a goose down jacket and gloves, and I was trying to draw a piece of furniture. One of my best friends here in town, a fellow named Brian, who, if you know anything about the Hardee's restaurants here in town, Brian is one of the smartest people I know and has done a tremendous job of managing the Hardee's operations in Boone and Ashe County and Mountain City. They're those three stores, the Hardee's stores in Boone, Mountain City, and Ashe County, are some of the top 3 Hardee's stores in this country under the leadership of Brian Hass. Brian walked in up there one day when I was in my goose down jacket and trying to draw a piece of furniture. He came to check on me, and he'd been out with his buddies drinking coffee, and here I am sitting there trying to draw a piece of furniture, and he has to go to the bathroom, and he goes in the bathroom, and the toilet was frozen. Sorry. He said, Art, I'm going to get you a kerosene heater. And I said, that's wonderful, but I can't afford the kerosene. So he brought the kerosene heater and the, might have to jump in.
Well, he did. Anyway, we received a lot of support. That's just one example. But there were many other people who reached out to us and encouraged us and helped whenever they could,
Here's one. I had to get back out to Dallas. We couldn't afford a plane ticket, but there was an event going on in Dallas, and I just had to get back out there. So growing up in Winston-Salem, which is the home of Haynes Knitting, Reynolds Tobacco, at that time, Wachovia Bank, Wake Forest University, I went to my parents' house and got on the phone. We didn't have cell phones back in the day, and didn't have internet. I had to use their phone book, So I started calling around to all those places and hoping that I could find a ride on a private plane going out to Dallas. Guess what? I got a ride on a plane going to Dallas, Texas. So it's don't be afraid to ask for help, no matter what. People want to help. There's so much help available to you if you just ask. There was another story about a fella who heard about our plight and knew that we were trying to build this indoor furniture. we didn't know where in the world this guy came from, but I'm in the fireplace shop one day and this guy walks in and he said, "I'm Bill Massey." He said, "I've heard about you and I've heard you want to give up. I'm here to see if I can help." He said, "Can you give me the cost of materials that you think, what you think is the cost of materials to build one of these baker's racks?" So I laid it all out for him and we spent a couple hours together. And he said, "I've got some things to do. I'll see you in a couple of weeks." He came back the next day and he said, "Son, if you can do this, you've got a gold mine." And, you know, that just him telling me that, I found out later that he was the chief financial officer for a company down in Asheboro. If you go to the Asheboro Zoo from this area, you go right by B.B. Walker Shoe Company. And Bill was the chief financial officer for B.B. Walker Shoe Company back in those days. And some friend had said to Bill, "See if you can help these kids out." And that's what he did. There's a story about Rick Grant. Rick Grant is our partner now. We gave Rick Grant half of our business 10 years ago.
He earned it.
He earned it. He worked for a year for nothing. This man took another company from $80 million to $300 million under his leadership. When he saw the company, when he saw some things going on in the company, he resigned. 2 years later, that big company went bankrupt, and Rick was walking around at the furniture market in High Point wondering what he wanted to do with the rest of his life, and somebody introduced me. So I started talking to Rick, as Susan said a little while ago, and I'll never forget this one. I stood in the parking lot of our building, and I called Rick and I said, "It's just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's driving me crazy because I know the opportunities that this little company has." And Rick came on board with us, and it's been a dream come true situation. So if you just ask, the help is there. Passion and determination. The accountants aren't always right. Don't quit. Goes back to the story of running cross country. My brother came up to watch me run over at Moses Cone Park in Blowing Rock, and I was running around the track and the course over there, and I was so fed up. Something clicked in me. I was so fed up. I ran off the course and jumped in my brother's car and said, "Let's go." At that point, I became a quitter. When our business went bad and we would go to the accountants and stuff, and Susan was the brains of the business, and she would show the accountants our position and everything, and they studied it and tried to see if they could do anything for us. And they said, "It's too far gone. You got to quit." I sat right there at the desk. I sat right there at the edge of the desk, and the accountant was looking at me when he said, "You got to quit." Susan's kind of sitting behind us like he's going to tell me I've got cancer or something. And I said, "No, I can't quit." I said, "I quit one thing in my life, and it haunts me to this day." So we figured out a way to not quit. Paul Broyhill is a name you might recognize, Broyhill Furniture. Paul Broyhill was introduced to us, and he looked at our books and he said, "Son, there's no way you're going to make it. Why don't you come to work for me?" And I thought, well, if I'm so dumb I can't make it, why would you want me to go to work for him? Years later, I bumped into Paul out in Dallas, Texas, and it was like, "What are you doing here? How did you get here?" You know, it's like we were pretty proud. You jump in anytime you want to. Think and talk positive no matter what. If you can imagine being that far in debt, I became a depressed, negative person. And anytime one of my buddies would say, "Hey, Art, how's it going?" I'd say, it's really bad, man. It's really bad, blah, blah, blah. I was coming back from one of our suppliers in our van at 11 o'clock at night, Friday night, thinking to myself, all my buddies are out there. We graduated from college. We're supposed to be smart. We're supposed to be making money. They are. I'm not. What's going on here? And I was coming around near the Banner Elk River Airport up there on a curvy road, and I thought to myself, it's 11:30 Friday night. Somebody's going to come around. Now I got to be careful. There are drunks coming down the road. Sure enough, the next curve I went around, here comes a car down the middle of the road. I was driving a Ford Econoline van with 3 pallets of oak shelves for the baker's racks in the back of the van. When I went like that, those shelves just caused me to tumble upside down into a creek. Next day, long story short, I was not hurt that bad. I had a cracked rib and some glass in my head. But I called my buddies and asked for help. I called my buddies and I said, can you help me go get the baker's rack shelves out of the creek in the van and we put it all back together? I'll never forget, one of my buddies looked at the van laying down there upside down and he said, man, you are the unluckiest person in the world. He didn't see it the way I saw it. I am the luckiest person in the world. You know, and ever since that time, I carried the pictures of that van laying down there upside down in case I ever got back in a negative mode. I'd look at those pictures and realize how lucky I am. And what happened was I started talking positive. People say, how's business? How's business? I said, man, it's fantastic. We still owe $300,000, you know. Well, guess what? They wanted to invest in our business when I started talking positive about it instead of being negative. And I realized today that they have their own issues. They have their own problems. They don't want to hear negative. Talk positive, and people want a piece of you. You've probably heard that already, Sandra. Where am I? We're going to run out of time. Eric, what are you going to do about that?
Number one. Okay. We won't get finished.
Oh, one of my favorites is have a servant's heart. Give your customers more than they expect. Find that one for me, Susan. When we had the fireplace shop, we're trying to get it up and going. I would go out to one of the resorts and install a fire screen or something. And we had radios in the trucks. We didn't have cell phones back in the day. I had a little Motorola radio. Susan could call me from the fireplace shop and said, there's a Judge Grunsfeld over in Blowing Rock who wants you to come by and measure his fireplace and have you fix up a fire screen for him. So I get to Dr. Grunset's, Judge Grunset. I remember the name because he was in Winston-Salem too, and he's driving all the way from Winston-Salem to his house in Blowing Rock on the golf course. I get there a little bit before Judge Grunset, and not being one to sit around and do nothing, waiting on him to get there, I climb up on his roof. The way his house was made, chalet-style house, and I could get up on the railing of his house, and I got up on the roof. And I was doing this just to be busy. I didn't think, I'm going to get applause from him, but he pulled in the driveway, and there I am up on the roof cleaning out his gutters. And when I look back at that time, it's like I realize now he went to the country club that night to eat supper, and he told everybody in there about this crazy kid, unpaid, climbing up on his roof to clean out his gutters. Another story, and we try to hire people who have this same servant's heart attitude. One of my other favorite ones was a guy came in the fireplace shop. Notice I'm speeding up. Guy came in the fireplace shop and he said, I want you to go out to my house at Hound Ears and measure for me a fire screen. He said, I'm getting married in a couple of weeks and I want to be able to bring my new bride to my little chalet out there. So back in those days, you could do business on a handshake, and that's what we did. I went out, measured his fireplace, and I outfitted it before I came back. Hand made him a fire screen. I went out, mounted the tool sets, and I put the grate in the fireplace. And I was thinking to myself, he just wants to carry her across the threshold and go have a glass of wine by candlelight or something. So I went out in the yard and I gathered sticks and logs and I stuck newspaper under there and I took a pack of matches and I folded it so one match was sticking out. All that man had to do when he brought his bride into that house was strike a match. I mean, that's not all he had to do, but that's. Thank you. A couple of weeks later, he comes in the store and he says, he said, son, I can't believe what you did for me. He said, you don't even know who I am. But no, sir. He said, well, someday when you build your business big enough and you want a Mercedes, you come see me. I'm the largest Mercedes dealership in the southeastern United States. And, it's doing things beyond what they expect. I never did get a Mercedes. We drive a Chevrolet. One more of my favorites, though, and I don't want to run out of time.
No, you're going to have to just do one on each one, I think.
Crate and Barrel. Anybody heard of Crate and Barrel? We made beds for Crate and Barrel. We got this huge order. When you get an order from Crate and Barrel, it's not for one of these and one of these and one of these. They have 500 stores, so it's 500 of these and 500 of those. We got an order from Crate and Barrel, and I said to the team, I said, let's go sit down and see what can we do now we got the order to show them our appreciation and blow their minds. We came up with the idea, if you know Crate and Barrel, they have white bags. When you go in there and buy something, you get a white bag with big black Crate and Barrel letters on it. We came up with the idea of putting our beds that they bought in a Crate and Barrel box. They didn't ask for that. Normally, we would just have the brown cardboard box, and it's got big old Charleston Forge on there. We put Crate and Barrel on there, and that just blew them away. that when that bed went to that customer's house, we're bragging about Crate and Barrel, not Charleston Forge. So they saw that as a huge plus. We don't do business with Crate and Barrel anymore. They're the ones that went to China and kind of be honest. This is a cool one. As we started getting production going, we got an order from Australia for a container of furniture. We shipped that container of furniture to Australia, and as it goes across the ocean on those container ships, there's salt air and salt water and stuff. We're making metal furniture. We do everything we can to prevent it from rusting, but when it got there and they opened the doors, the furniture was rusted. They called me up. We're still $300,000 in debt. And they said, we got a problem here. And I panicked. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to fix it. What am I going to do? So I thought about it. I said, let me call you back. And I don't know how long it was, but I called them back and I said, okay, I believe you. Throw it in the ocean and we'll send you another container loaded full of furniture. They said, no, we're going to take care of it. Don't you worry about it. I told you we're the luckiest people in the world. And they took care of it. It was because of the honesty of me saying, we will take care of it. They said, no, we'll take care of it. Another thing happened. There's a company up north, Boston based, called Scan Design. Keep in mind, we're $300,000 in debt, and we get a $250,000 order from this company called Scan Design. It only had 15 employees. And they wanted the furniture, this big order, they wanted to deliver in 6 weeks. And I started thinking, can I do it? Can I do it? And I thought I figured it out how we could do it. So I said, yeah, we'll do it. I got the order. The order came across a stack of papers on my fax machine. I'm sitting in that cold office all by myself, and the fax machine started rolling, and the order started coming off that fax machine, and I started crying. It's a $250,000 order. We shipped the order. They wanted it in 6 weeks. Okay, we go to the furniture market. We've done everything we can to ship their order. I'm going to the furniture market. The production people are still making furniture. They called me up at the furniture market, and they said, we're going to have to charge you back because you didn't make the 6 weeks. He said, we're sending our trucks out with a coffee table on it, but they don't have the end table. So you're in trouble. I'm at the furniture market, 10 o'clock in the morning. I go to the back of the showroom and I fix me a scotch and water. I mean, what am I going to do? I walk up and down the hall with that scotch and water. I went back to the phone. I called him up and said, you're right. You charge us back. He said, we're not going to charge you back. We just wanted to know that we had a partner in business. So being honest is what I'm getting at.
And I want to jump in. I'm going to jump in and tell mine because this is important, I think, to hear. So when we told you that we owed $70,000 to our suppliers, we really did owe $70,000, and only one of them cut us off. Everybody else, what we did, and this was when we were in our 20s, we knew that we were not going to be able to pay them on time. And so we called them up before our bill became past due. And we said, we've run into some issues here. We're not going to be able to pay you on time, but you can come see us. We're not hiding. We're not avoiding your phone calls. We will start making some payments just as soon as we can. Some of these people we owed $12,000 to, some we owed $3,000. But what we did, and I still am very proud of this, is we set up a payment plan. And for a lot of these people, literally, I would send them $10 a week. And if we were juggling payroll or payroll taxes or whatever, then I'd call them and say, it's not going to be there this week. And then we got a little bit, we were growing and improving, and we tried to, make a deal and pay them off. And they said, oh, no, you're paying on time. Just keep right on doing it, So the honesty part and the integrity part is something very important to us in our company. And I feel like we've maintained that all these years.
The elephant?
We only get one more?
That can't be it.
No, it should be.
Give something back.
Okay.
The elephant, we hired this man to help us manage our business because it was just growing out of control the second time around. I walk him through the factory one day and I show him all the issues that we have, and I'm crying to him. It's like, how am I going to get my arms around this? And he said, do you know how to eat an elephant? I thought he was crazy. I thought he had a concussion. But that's when we learn, one bite at a time. Just take it one bite at a time. You can probably absorb some of this from what you've heard already in Eric's and Sandra's talks. I would like to say something about giving something back, though, make life better for others. When our business the first time around did go in the right direction, our kids were starting school over in Blowing Rock, and much to our disappointment, when they got to school, there weren't enough books for them to bring home and do their homework. And that really rattled our cage. Keep in mind, we were starting to make money by this time. We had the idea to call up the school principals and say, we want to help. We also recognize that there are school teachers out there who have wonderful ideas, but if they can't execute those ideas if they don't have the money, unless they reach into their own pockets and pull out the money and pay for those projects. So Susan and I called all the principals to the factory parking lot, lined them up out in the parking. There's 9 of them. And we brought our factory people out and had them stand behind the school principals. And we gave each one of them $1,000. And you would have thought we gave each one of them $1 million. The greatest thrill of that, I think, was having third graders write us thank you notes for helping the school teachers. And I say that because I'm really trying to fast forward this. One of them used that money to buy some handbells for a third grade class. And this is how the Education Foundation started. Watauga Education Foundation is a group of people here in the community that raises money and gives that money to the school teachers who apply by way for a grant to buy something. One particular teacher, Lisa Combs, bought handbells for a third grade class. That third grade class came and we had the idea to put them on stage and have an audience like you and let you see what we had done for those students, and maybe you'll contribute money. Somebody said, why don't you invite this lady from Blowing Rock, and I won't mention her name except in her name is the word Kennedy. So she comes and she's in the audience and these kids are playing handbells and there was not a dry eye in the crowd. And I stood up after they played and I said, what we're trying to do is raise $10,000 to start an endowment fund, so we're not out there begging, knocking on doors all the time. And this Ms. Kennedy lady said, she stood up in the background and she said, you need to raise more than $10,000. I'll pledge to you $50,000 if you can raise $50,000. So that's how the Watauga Education Foundation, it was already started before Susan and I got involved, but it had no movement to it. It was people sitting around talking about ideas and stuff. So the idea of giving something back and making life better. By the way, the Education Foundation today, we just went online and looked at it. And over the last 20 years, they've been able to give almost more than $1 million back. Eric's on the Education Foundation. More than $1 million back to the teachers for projects for the school students in the community. And that has probably helped Charleston Forge in the community as much as anything we could have possibly done. You support the kids and help them get a good education, and you got something going for you. Everybody out there is going to have kids in the school system, and they love you for trying to help them. I'm sorry we've run over our time. We enjoyed it. Thank you for having us. You know, I thought when he said an hour presentation, he said semester. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Art and Susan. So as Art mentioned, these folks are a legend in our community. I know they would not stand up here and tell you that, but I served for 6 years on the Watauga Education Foundation Board, and they give close to $50,000 a year over 20 years to supplement state budgets and have a big impact on schools and children. So thank you very much for that. Why doesn't everyone stand up and just stick your hands out like this? Yeah. Just stretch a little bit. All right. It's time for our keynote presentation. All right, now you have to sit back down. All right. Come on, high schoolers. Yeah. Okay, So as you know, if you've been involved with the College of Business here at Appalachian, you know that one of our big themes is business for good. We're big believers that we believe that business is really the solution to a lot of the world's problems. We can raise all the money we want, we can do all the philanthropy we want, but at the end of the day, if business doesn't get behind solving some of the world's problems, they're never going to get solved. Okay, there we go. So we found out, we heard about a year ago, we learned about this organization called Enactus. And Enactus is an organization that is and you'll hear some of the stats in a minute, but there are students around the world on college campuses in 36 countries who have decided to get together and address some of the issues in their local communities. So if you're familiar with the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, you know they're lofty and meaningful goals like no hunger, no poverty, access to clean water, social justice, managing local resources and the Earth's resources. What we've learned in this process of getting to know Enactus is that the impact they have at the local and the international level is fairly profound. So we, being an organization in the College of Business, being focused on business for good, and Appalachian having a focus on sustainability in general, it seemed like a nice fit for us. So we went to one of the events in Kansas City this year and got to see some of the impact that they're having in the U.S. They hold a World Cup competition where the U.S. competes with the other 36 countries. That sense of competition brings out a lot of innovation and creativity from the students. And so we started a local Enactus chapter this semester. I'm going to let Jacqueline come up here and introduce our speaker. And we're very happy to have Enactus on campus. The folks here in the front row are the leaders of the local team. If anybody in this room is interested in participating or supporting the Enactus program here at Appalachian, please let us know. So this is Jackie. Jackie Parrish is in our MBA program. She's the president of Enactus Appalachian, and she's going to introduce our speaker.
Hi, everyone. Great. All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. As Eric said, my name is Jacqueline Parrish. I'm an MBA student here at Appalachian State University, and my focus is sustainable business. And I'm also the president of our newly founded club, Enactus. Some of my fellow members, teammates are here. And basically, our whole goal in Enactus is to link our members' hope for a better world with a business strategy in order to make that happen. And Dr. Martin Messner, has said that basically the whole goal is to do business for good. And that is how we also, at the College of Business, interpret everything we do, is to do business for good. So at Enactus, we're creating business for good. Our next speaker exemplifies what it is to do business for good and to create business for good. Rachel Jarosh is President and Chief Executive Officer of Enactus, the largest experimental learning platform dedicated to creating a better world while developing the next generation of leaders with a head for business and a heart for the world. Under Ms. Jarosh's leadership, Enactus is driving innovation to create greater impact for the 72,000 participating Enactus University students in 36 countries, in the communities in which they are addressing economic, environmental, and social challenges. Prior to joining Enactus in 2016, Ms. Jarosh built a distinctive professional portfolio in communications and philanthropic strategy, law, and finance. She served as president of the foundation at Pentair, where she launched a multi-year water initiative in partnership with the Center for Disease Control and nonprofit organizations, which now provide sustainable access to safe water for 3 million people. Earlier, Ms. Jarosh worked in strategic communications and equity analysis and began her career as an attorney. Ms. Jarosh is also a writer, and her work has been published in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and the Star Tribune. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Rachel Jarosh.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that warm welcome. Wow, that's big. So I see a lot of students in this audience, and I'm delighted to be here. consider for a minute if by the time you graduate from this remarkable institution, you could say you'd saved a struggling local business, or that you had launched a new hydroponic growing technology that was feeding an entire orphanage in rural Haiti, and at the same time had launched a business with that hydroponic growing technology to fund that orphanage. What if by the time you graduated from college, you had launched 40 entrepreneurs on new business paths and increased their family incomes by 43% that year? So if you were on the same team of Enactus as our friend Jeff, is this working? There we go. We're a little behind. That's all right. Sorry, everybody. There we go. So let me back up. If you were on the same team as this young man, Jeff Yankovich, who started an Enactus team at Pittsburgh State just 6 years ago, you could say you had done all of those things. That team of 32 students launched a new business in Haiti that funds an orphanage today, almost entirely. 92% of the funding for an orphanage that houses 722 orphans comes from a hydroponic growing company. That same company feeds that orphanage. They also started working with an entrepreneur in their backyard in their own community and helped that entrepreneur turn his business around, and then realized that through the lens of his business, there was a way to help struggling young migrants in their community start new businesses. Jeff today works at one of our partner companies. So Jeff really started out his college career wanting to be an entrepreneur, but joined the Enactus team and realized he had a lot to learn. And having done what he did through Enactus, decided to join a company and get some training. But his intent, of course, is to be an entrepreneur when he turns 40. Jeff started Enactus, much like Jacqueline and these students here, as a freshman. He was the student team leader his freshman year. Can you imagine? You can imagine, right? It's not easy. It's a startup. But that year he attended a team training, which Enactus provides to our colleagues here at Appalachian State, and then pursued the experiential learning platform that we provide to create a really strong Enactus program. During his sophomore and junior year, he attended a team training of our fellows program, which is part of our curriculum that creates an opportunity for students who engage in Enactus to learn online from some of our partner companies, to earn a certification as an Enactus Fellow. And he attended the US Expo, which Eric and some of our colleagues attended this past year. I'll talk a little bit about what that US Expo is in a little while, but what I really want you to understand is that from a business standpoint, Enactus students are simply identifying needs in their community, and as Jacqueline said, using business as a force for good to meet them. It's a way to actually start businesses while you are a student. Jeff is one of 72,000 students around the world, as Eric mentioned. Today in 37 countries, we just welcomed our new country, Belgium. And much like the campus here, is filled with students who simply want to drive change in their own communities. And they might define that community quite broadly. In Jeff's case, he had a classmate from Haiti, and that's how they were introduced to Haiti and the orphanage with whom they worked. So why do people participate in Enactus? I asked Jeff what inspired him, and I'll be interested to hear from all of you. What inspired you to take this on? Jeff said to me recently, "It simply changed my life. It taught me that business skills and personal values could align. And it taught me business skills and personal values that I wouldn't have gleaned in my classroom. And I know that it aligns very well with what you're striving to achieve here on campus, which is to think about how to use business to drive good, not only profit." For Jeff, it also connected him to a company where he thought he could continue to drive good in the community in which he works. And that was compelling to him because, as he told me just yesterday on the phone, I still intend to spin out and start my own business. You understand that, right? And I said, yes, of course I do. So it's a pleasure to be here today and to officially welcome Enactus onto this campus. Somebody asked me, why does Enactus do what you do? I mean, there are lots of programs and lots of ways that students can learn from entrepreneurs like today to help them understand how to drive and be a force for good in a community. My short answer is our collective future, whether you're 18 or 80 and in this room, our collective future depends on what Enactus as an experiential learning platform complements to your curriculum. We are a network of student leaders, business leaders, very importantly, business leaders who are engaged with our students, and academic leaders who help guide every Enactus team to be a force for good. But we are also the largest experiential learning platform in the world that is solely dedicated to students who want to apply what you are learning here on this campus in the real world before you graduate. So in the US, we are 10,000 students strong. We are in 404 campuses, and those students invested over 185,000 hours this year in their communities to drive change. And as you can see from my last slide, we're 72,000 students worldwide, but consider 72,000 students who, in addition to carrying a full course load, many of them have side jobs to pay for their tuition, and of course, the busy personal lives that you all have, I'm sure. They still managed to invest 7.3 million hours, but the outcome of that investment is over 1 million people's lives have been improved. It's a remarkable thing, and I don't know about you, Eric, or you, Brad, but when I was in college, I wasn't doing that. I'm not going to talk about what I was doing, but I wasn't doing that. So our mission is very simple. It's to engage entrepreneurial leaders, the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders, to make a better, more sustainable world. And we really strive for nothing less than to create a better world. It's as simple as that. And I think many of you are in this room for that very same reason. Now, we know that our future depends on this work, but how do we know it? Well, I'm sure some of the entrepreneurs who spoke before me today can tell you this is very real, but never before have we seen more disruption in the global workplace or in industry. You can start with Google, and you can go all the way down the chain to the smallest entrepreneurs who are driving change in food markets, for example. Never today have we lived in a world, never before, excuse me, have we lived in a world where the 5-year-olds today, 82% of 5-year-olds today starting kindergarten, and Brad has one of those kindergartners, will be working in a job when they turn 21 that we can't even predict. We haven't invented yet. It's a remarkable time that we're living in. And what it means is it's a remarkable time for entrepreneurial mindsets, whether you choose to join a company when you graduate or to launch out and try to strike out on your own. And never before, clearly, have we faced more complex challenges as we look, of course, at globalization and our exploding population. So consider for a moment what the World Economic Forum report talks about when they looked last year at the world in 2020, just a few years away. There are 10 key skills that will be required, and they aren't necessarily the ones the majority of young people in universities today are being tested on or taught. The first, of course, is complex problem solving. That's simple. We all understand what that means and what it looks like, but it's very hard to teach. Critical thinking, creativity, all things that you heard, I think, from my fellow speakers earlier today. People management, team building, and coordination with people in different majors, with different interests, from different backgrounds and different perspectives. Emotional intelligence goes hand in hand with people management, of course, yes? Judgment, decision-making, a service orientation, your most important message there at the end, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. You can look at any report about the future of our workplace and how to make the world a better place for more people. Those are the 10 skills, these kind of middle skills that you see, that are foundational to what will drive the future. And these are exactly the skills that Enactus teaches. And it's not because we have a big curriculum. Frankly, we could never compete with the quality of the education you're gaining in the classroom at Appalachian State. We are intended to be a complement. How do you take what you're learning in that classroom, look at a real world problem, and bring them together to solve it? Now, I can speak from my experience as a professional. I didn't really get that opportunity until somebody was judging me on it in my new job and ranking me. How was I doing? I didn't get to experiment and fail and learn. Now, workplaces today versus 20 years ago when I started are a bit different. We value failure in many ways, and we celebrate it and the learnings that come from it. But you can do that right now through Enactus and really learn where and how your skills are best applicable. We know that because we measured the Enactus Advantage last year. We started to understand, what does it mean if Jacqueline and her classmates take that extra time that they are somehow going to find in their schedules and engage in Enactus? Well, what we know it means is that they will outperform your peers, frankly. Our students outperform their peers on several measures, especially in terms of leadership and creativity and intelligence. And that's really what we know when we talk about those foundational middle skills become the basis of a successful business. We saw them in the key messages on the slide just a minute ago. You see them repeated every time you talk to a business leader. Resilience, first of all, that means never giving up, first and foremost. Creativity, responsibility, accountability, service to others, outperforming others, and surprising your customer, whether your customer is a homeless community shelter that you seek to address and help solve that issue, or whether it's Crate and Barrel. So while we know that impact data is really important, and we know that the Enactus learning process is important, we mostly know that stories are important. So let me tell you just one. 11 years ago, Belmont University launched their Enactus program. There were 12 students who engaged the first year. Not a big group. That's not a big group on a big campus like this. But they were very dedicated, and they were led by two different students. One was an environmental studies major, really focused on how do we solve the challenges that are being created today through the waste that we as a civilization have generated and continue to generate, as well as the poor use of our environmental resources. But his teammate and other co-lead was a social services major, and she was really focused on, in her community, the issue of homelessness. So they started out the way every Enactus team starts out. They went through team training, and they went out into their community to do what we call a needs assessment. What are the needs that are really facing our community, and how can we make a difference and where? And they decided to start by interviewing a homeless shelter to start to understand the systemic needs underlying homelessness in their community. And what they quickly learned was that in their community, there were several prisons nearby, and many people, when they were released from prison, came into the city and they could not get a job. They were not employable because they'd been formerly incarcerated. And while they were talking to shelters to understand what had been done in the community to try to address homelessness, they also happened to look around the environment they were in, and they were in a very blighted part of the city, and they saw mattresses discarded everywhere. And for any of you who've driven around a really dense urban area in a poor part of a city, you've probably seen it, right? A mattress laying on the side, it's kind of fallen apart in the rain, maybe on an empty lot. Well, they noticed them everywhere. So while they were trying to understand the issue of homelessness, they went to the city and they said, why are there mattresses on the sidewalks everywhere? And the city said, well, it's very simple. They're not really easily recyclable. They end up in landfills. They're expensive to haul, so we only pick them up a few times a year. So what did they decide to do? They decided to start a business that would recycle mattresses, but they would only employ formerly incarcerated people. That meant that they spent an entire year with 2 homeless shelters and a cohort of about 27 men the first year. And they worked with those men on basic workforce readiness skills. Now, that's not particularly innovative. There are lots of workforce training programs in the world. But what they did next was that first group of 27 men, they trained on how do you show up for work? What does it mean to be a part of a team? And of those 27, they picked a group that had some education and taught them some basic bookkeeping skills. This is a big investment. For an entire year, they just worked with this cohort of formerly homeless men. Then they went to the city and they won a contract to pick up all the mattresses in that city and 3 surrounding neighborhoods. And they bought 1 truck and they launched Project Springback. It's a lovely project. And all they did was pick up mattresses, and the men that they employed then tore them apart into their recyclable pieces and their non-recyclable pieces, and they launched a business. Today, that business is $13 million in revenue 6 years later. It employs a few hundred men. They have franchises in 5 states. They recycled 7.5 million pounds of mattresses last year. And they have plans to expand to 27 states within 3 years. And by the way, of that first group of 12 students, only 2 stayed with the business. The rest of the business is managed by members of those first 27 formerly homeless men. They only employ formerly homeless and formerly incarcerated people across the United States. A bunch of 19-year-olds did that. So for those of you who are 18, 19, 20, that's what you can do. When I was 19, I couldn't have envisioned doing that. I didn't have the courage. Frankly, if I was 19 today, I don't think I'd have the guts to join an Enactus team. It takes a lot of courage to join an Enactus team, but it also takes a tremendous amount of resilience. And so we know in some ways that the students who choose our program already have some of the traits that will lead to the greatest successes that we can envision. There are a couple of other examples of people who've done other things with the Enactus program. Tina Day is one of them. She's a US alumni from the University of Texas at Austin. Tina also launched her program. The program at University of Texas Austin today has over 400 students on its team and a wait list of over 500. They're very selective in the teammates they allow, which is a wonderful success story, but it's simply that you can only manage so many people. So think about, as you launch your team, the fact that the people who are starting your Enactus chapter are already managing a small business. Tina is now an active business advisory board member. What does that mean? Every Enactus team in the US, all 404 of them, are supported by a business advisory board. And this is particularly to those business leaders in this community who are here. Business advisory board members serve as your resource group. They might have expertise in supply chain management or customer relations. They might have insight into what to do when you've hit a challenge in your budgeting process, but they support your team. And many of our alumni come back to support our teams. Tina does that, but she's also a project manager at Intuit. Intuit's a fascinating company because what do? They create software for many of the small businesses our teams create and many of the businesses probably in this room. Tina decided to join Intuit because she thought she was best an entrepreneurial leader. She saw a company that would let her take her entrepreneurial interests and her mindset and drive change. And so she's now very focused on working with the very types of small businesses that she helped create when she was at Enactus. Monica, you see there, is actually an alumni from our China program. She also is incredibly active with our teams in Shanghai, but today she also decided she wanted to become an entrepreneur in one of the largest businesses in China. She works at YHD.com. It's the largest grocery online retailer in China. She's 30 years old and she launched their innovation center. That is an innovation center which generated $2 billion in RMB, has 200 implemented projects this past year alone, and 30 successful incubators. So she saw an opportunity through her Enactus Learning to understand what is it to join a huge organization and launch other smaller ones within it. She's received lots of awards for her work, but most of all, she said to me recently, If I hadn't joined Enactus, I wouldn't have understood what it means to start something. And it doesn't really matter where I was starting it. What I was most focused on was the value I could create if I launched something new. She's creating remarkable value, but so is Bradley. Bradley would have loved to be here today. I know he loves talking to groups like this. Bradley is a UK alum, and Bradley also was instrumental in his team's development. He joined a team that was incredibly weak, and he came to one of the competitions that Eric mentioned, and I'll show a little bit of our competitions in a minute. But Bradley really decided when he saw a winning team that he wanted to understand what made them a winner. So he walked up to the winning team at an Enactus competition, and he said, "How did you win? I want to know every single thing you did over the last 3 years as a team to win." Now, everything that he learned from that team wasn't directly applicable, but a lot of it was. And a few years later, his team won a national competition with a project that he since scaled. So when he graduated, he took that kernel of an idea that the Enactus team had started, and he scaled it into something called Wessex Social Venture. Today, he works with 200 entrepreneurs in 4 countries, Kenya, Uganda, Cameroon, and Zambia. He has a mission of nothing less than benefiting 3 million people across Africa. And he's done it by taking the design of a business model that he started while he was at Enactus, which is very simple. It's a business in a box. How do you go to communities that have no infrastructure, very little education, very little training, and help people become entrepreneurs? They created a business in a box venture. That business in a box solves a couple of different issues that are common to those markets, sanitation, some water issues, etc. And he launched entrepreneurs. Today, he just launched the largest social enterprise as part of a funded project from USAID, UKAID, and Unilever. And he is achieving sustainable progress, with a global social franchising model. It's not very common in today's world yet, but I guarantee it will become so, and it will become so in large part because of Bradley's efforts. So how do you get involved in Enactus? As Jacqueline noted, we just started here on campus, and this community needs you. The Otago community needs you. We know that there are challenges here, correct? Food insecurity, first and foremost, a huge focus, not only here, but in almost every market in which we operate. We asked our 72,000 students last year, what's the most important issue in your community that resonates and that you think you can tackle? Food insecurity was number 1, whether we asked students in Ghana and South Africa, Germany or Canada, the US or China. So this year we've launched something called the online platform where all of our students are connecting worldwide to say, here's a solution we're applying in our backyard. Does it work in yours? And it's our hope to scale some of those solutions much more quickly going forward because we have so many students working on the same issues. But your chapter here will help give you the tools and a platform to address those issues in new ways. It's our hope that you will take that opportunity and engage in sustainable solutions. And I know that if you do, you're not only going to learn a lot, fail some, and succeed some, but you're going to make lifelong friends because that's what our students tell us first and foremost. I was at our Enactus World Cup just a month ago with some of your colleagues in this room, and I was sitting next to the winning team. And the young woman who led that team, a team that, by the way, increased the average annual income of a community in Zambia by 315%, launched 5 new businesses, and taught new farming practices to sustain an entire rural area in Zambia. I asked her what was the most important thing she had learned, and she said, I learned I had value, and I learned I could make a difference. And I said, can you tell me more? And she said, yeah. When I was in high school, I had really, really severe mental health issues. I was suicidal at times, actually, and my parents sent me off to college, and I was completely lost. But I knew there was something I could do, and I just couldn't find it. I just felt like I didn't fit anywhere. I joined the entrepreneurship program in the business school. I reached out to a few different clubs, and I couldn't find anything. And then I found Enactus. And I not only found a purpose, but I found my tribe. I found a bunch of people who maybe felt a little bit like I did, like I was struggling through this kind of entrepreneurship curriculum, but I really didn't have any confidence yet in what I was doing or how I was learning and applying what I was learning. But I found this tribe of people who were willing to just try with me. And when I started, I couldn't even get on a stage. And I looked at her and I laughed because that day she had presented on stage with her team in front of 4,000 people. About 100 of them were CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world. Another 80 of them were senior executives from some of the largest companies in the world. And another 50 or so were venture capitalists and entrepreneurs who had built remarkable businesses. And I said, "You had no confidence?" And she said, "Yeah, I really didn't. But I knew there was something in me and I just couldn't find people who saw it too." So you will indeed make lifelong friends. I'm confident of that. I know that. I know that from personal experience because I've been leading this organization for only 2 years. And you're not only going to make friends with your fellow students on this campus, but in our cohort of 10,000 students in the US, and for that team that goes to the World Cup with students from around the world. You're also going to make friends with our business partners, and some of those are in the room. So many of you may know Brad Sparks from KPMG. He's an alum. He's a huge supporter of Enactus. We're very grateful for that support, but he's also very interested, and many of his colleagues around the world are very interested in what you're going to do here through the Enactus chapter. And they're going to mentor you, and they're going to become your friends and your guides. And that student who won at World Cup, when she finished her story, she said to me, "So yeah, I may have gotten on a stage and spoken to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I'm only crying on this stage because my mentors are in the audience." See, I'm going to tear up just thinking of her. "My mentors are in the audience and my best friends are on this team. And I know when I'm 70 and I'm in the audience mentoring students, I'm going to be crying even harder." So that's what Enactus is really about. It's a tribe of like-minded leaders. And we are all entrepreneurs at heart. Eric, are you tearing up too? We are all entrepreneurs at heart, and we may be applying that entrepreneurial mindset in different ways. Some of us will go off to launch businesses, hopefully as successful as yours and yours. Some of us will end up at KPMG and other big companies. And some of us will have the privilege, like I do, of leading an organization like Enactus that is doing this. But at the end of the day, we understand that by applying that entrepreneurial mindset, you can create a better life, not only for yourself, but for thousands, or in our case, millions of others. So I'm not going to spend much more time talking about why we know that business can be a force for good. I want to focus on what you might think about here. There are lots of challenges in this county, like every county in the United States. A lot of our teams, when they launch, see the challenges and stories we tell about problems in Haiti or Malaysia or Ghana or Northern Canada, and they say, "We want to do an exchange program and we want to go somewhere else." And I say, please look in your backyard. In my backyard in Minneapolis, one of the biggest challenges is the opioid crisis. It's not unique to us by any stretch. It certainly touches here, as does food insecurity. There are lots of innovative solutions in all of your minds. And if you sit down and work through the Enactus platform with the training that you're receiving in the classroom, I guarantee you, you will find solutions. So I encourage you to think about what that needs assessment looks like. And I encourage you to consider joining the team and bringing your own perspective to it. Because in the needs assessment, one of the most important things to do, right, is to talk to people who are already working on those issues. But the other piece of that is to bring your own experience to that table. Some of the best solutions that we've seen applied, like the one I spoke about in Project Springback, came from a woman who lived in the community where that homeless shelter was located. She knew exactly what that homeless community looked like before she started the needs assessment process. She'd volunteered in some of those shelters, and she knew that there had to be solutions that were easily accessible. And it wasn't until she found a classmate who was thinking about environmental issues that they could find it together. As you think about that, also keep in mind one day that we'll ask you to be judged on the impact you create. Kind of core to what we do as a program globally is we encourage competition. And we encourage competition not because we think there are winners and losers in this, but because we believe, like in business, competition encourages creativity. So you've all, well, some of you have attended the Enactus national competition. We have a competition structure in every country. In every country, it looks the same. The judging criteria is the same, and it's entirely focused on what impact have you created and how have you done it? What does your P&L look like? How do you plan to fund this? Is it sustainable? And how much have you changed lives or impacted the planet or impacted the prosperity of the community? So those are the three lenses through which we examine all of our projects. Probably the most exciting part of that process actually is at the national competition level, because if you come to the US Enactus Exposition next year, you will see over 100 teams competing. And while the best projects and the most sustainable businesses hopefully are rewarded, we know that every single one of them has value. And that's why so many of our partner companies come to help judge that process. But the best team goes to the Enactus World Cup. Some of you were at the World Cup. How many of you in here were at the World Cup? Nobody came? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. So we had our Enactus World Cup just a month ago. This year it was held in Silicon Valley, which was kind of fun for us, admittedly. But every year it moves to a different country, with the exception of next year, when we're going to return to Silicon Valley with some partners. Most recently, it was in Johannesburg, and London, and Toronto, Beijing, and now the US. At the World Cup, we welcomed 5,000 attendees. Half of that was students. About a third of that, of the remainder, were alumni, and then the rest were our business partners. So think about all of the faculty, students, business leaders, and alumni together, thinking about how to change the world. Here's what happens when we all come together. You have 36 teams competing on a big stage. I wanted to include that shot because I could not have stood in front of 5,000 people when I was 20. I can barely do it today, I'll be honest. But they're up there competing in front of everybody. And here's what happens. 4 go to the final round and 1 wins, but all 36 find other teams working on similar projects and start to scale. You might find a solution to a food insecurity issue here that's equally applicable in Johannesburg. It might be equally applicable in Chicago or rural California. And it isn't until competition that you get to see what other people are doing and start the opportunity to scale. And we'll solve that differently going forward with this online platform. But in many ways, that's the joy of the competition. It's actually not about the win or lose. It's about the connections and learnings you get from other teams. Let me give you an example of what a competition looks like just for a moment. I think we have a short video. This is the World Cup in London in 2017. So you'll get a sense for some of the business leaders who are there, as well as the competition.
Which can be utilized in a meaningful manner to get people to, get off the street and actually do something about it. Working on over 3,800 projects a year. At KPMG, we are big believers in Annapolis. This is a call for everybody, not just elected students, to be responsible citizens and take action. That's over 7 million volunteer hours. Make sure that we cross-collaborate the things that we connect this project. Impacting the lives of over 1.3 million people. You become Enactus teams because you found remarkable, innovating, captivating, interesting, profitable, commercially deliverable, significant projects that make a real difference. Helping to achieve the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We see the world bigger than ourselves and our family. 97 Enactus teams entered the water race with a united goal of clean water for the world by 2030. It is about a child not falling sick. It is about a woman not caring for her safety. You've understood the power of social entrepreneurship. The best thing you can do as leaders in this world is very simply put yourself to the service of others. A plan
for peace, a plan for people, a plan for prosperity, a plan for the planet, and above all, a plan for partnership.
So we like to think of the Enactus World Cup as the Olympics of social enterprise. I forgot to mention that in all of this, there's a bit of fun mixed in too. So you saw some of it there, right? There's a lot of celebration around our cultural identities, sharing with each other how that works and what it looks like. But most of all, we have a lot of fun celebrating the impact we've made throughout the year. It's actually not about the best team, although the best team is driving amazing impact. It's really about understanding and celebrating what we've learned and the capacity we have to drive change going forward. That's why it's fun. And I want to just take a minute to tell you how I came to this job before I take some Q&A. And I'm going to invite Jacqueline and Eric to come up with me in case you have questions specific to the campus. But 10 years ago, I was driving this amazing little business within a water technology company called Pentair. I was helping drive this organization's acquisition strategy globally. And we all know water is a global issue, right? But it's a very local problem. It's different in northern China than southern China. It's different in New Mexico than it is here, but it's a problem almost everywhere. It was incredibly fulfilling work. And I was also leading the foundation at that company. So I got to see the lens of water challenges, not only from a business perspective, but from a very tangible and tactical perspective as we sought to go in after major national and natural disasters and help people with access. And when I was in that job, I had this opportunity to go to this thing called the Enactus World Cup. It happened to be in Berlin that year. I'd never heard of Enactus. I had no idea what it was. I sort of begrudgingly said okay because it was a customer who asked me and I felt like I had to. And I showed up to this thing, and the first day was this parade of students from, at that time, 25 countries, marching across the stage in national dress, carrying a flag, celebrating, and I had no idea what they were celebrating. And then I started watching the competition, and I was astounded by what the students were achieving. But on the second day, there was this great thing that we do, and we've changed it a little bit since then, but we call it the top-to-top forum. So we invite leaders from all of the Enactus teams to sit down at tables with leaders from all the companies and entrepreneurial endeavors that are present. And we just have a conversation around a challenging topic. That year it happened to be recovery from a very hard economic time. And the question posed to all of us was, what was the cause and how were we going to prevent this economic recession that had such a dramatic impact on every country represented in the room? I was, more than a decade into my career, so I had a perspective, but at my table, I had 6 students, 2 from the United States, 2 from the Ukraine, and 2 from France. Now, for those of you who've studied economics or have a view of global economics, you might appreciate that some of the answers kind of played to stereotypes. So the US students said, well, there were some problems in the banking industry because at that time we were very clear about what was being reported in terms of the underlying financial instruments that related to mortgages in the US that had caused this recession. So they gave sort of an answer that related to what they'd read in newspapers because they really hadn't had a chance to study the topic. And the students from France said, well, in the economic system, there are regulators who look at this market, and if regulators had done their job, we would have never had a problem. And I could feel the 2 women from the Ukraine next to me, and they were 19 and 21. And they were sort of shifting in their seats as people were talking. I could tell they were agitated, and I thought, well, maybe they're nervous because we hold our competition in English, so lots of students are there, and they have to communicate in their second language. And they kept shifting and turning as the other students were talking. And I thought, well, that's a little odd. I'm going to turn to them. So I turned to them and I said, would you like to jump in? And one of the girls turned to me and she said, so can I be honest? And I said, I'd expect nothing less. And she said, she turned to the rest of the table and she said, that's complete crap. Okay, she actually used a different word, but I'm not going to repeat it. And then she looked at me and she said, did I use bleep correctly? And I said, I think you did. And she said, I come from a country that is just emerging as an economy that's functional. I know what it's like to live in a country where economics don't work. I know what it's like when businesses aren't run with integrity. And yes, we might need government regulation. And yes, we might need big industry to play a role in emerging economies. But what I know is if every single business leader in my country doesn't approach their business with integrity and an orientation towards service to their customer and their community, we will fail. And in the Ukraine, if I have anything to do with it, we're not going to fail because I know as a 5-year-old what it feels like to be in an economy that doesn't work. And business has to be the driver of solving those problems. And it will only be the driver if every business leader acts with integrity. That's the day I fell in love with Enactus. Because every student at the table, didn't matter what country they were from, turned over and said, well, yeah, that's the real answer. I was trying to sound smart. She opted to join a partner company, and today is the controller for all of Southeast Asia. She's the youngest controller in a company that employs over 200,000 people. And she has been able to achieve that, like so many of our students, because of what she calls the Enactus advantage. We know that when our students graduate, whether they go work for a company, whether they start their own, whether they end up in a nonprofit like this one, that they tell us they are happier in their jobs 10 years after they graduate than their peers. They earn more than their peers. Interesting correlation. And they have been promoted more quickly. I'm convinced she was promoted so quickly because she embodies exactly what she communicated at that table. I've been fortunate enough to be a mentor with her for all these years, and she came to the World Cup this year and spoke on stage, and we try to feature many of our alumni on stage. So one day I hope to welcome one of you to the main stage to be talking about exactly what you've done, both here starting the program and what you do afterwards. So with that, I'm going to close and take a few questions if you'd like, and I'd invite Jacqueline to come up as well, because I know we're just getting started here on campus, and the more students from the more majors with different interests, the stronger this team will be. Just like every corporate board, we know if the board is diverse, the business is stronger. Same with an Enactus team. So we encourage all of you to come and learn more about Enactus through Jacqueline and Eric and others. Sure, come on up. I saw a hand go up right away, so I don't know if there's any questions. Hi. We're small enough we can maybe shout out. Hi.
So, I was just wondering, so this question's more so for Jacqueline.
Yeah.
How do we get involved on campus with the organization?
You can contact, I could give you my email directly, but basically, we're looking at any majors. It's not just business majors. We want collaboration from all across campus, because in the real world, once we graduate and we leave here, you will be collaborating with people from different backgrounds, different majors, different understandings. So I could give you my email directly as soon as we're done here, but yeah, or Eric at the Center of Entrepreneurship on the second floor of Peacock.
Like a classic startup. A direct connection. Do you want to talk about why you decided to undertake this?
Yeah. In this past spring, I actually was presented research application that we had performed here, reviewing commodity-based driven deforestation. And in that presentation, I actually got to meet Brad Sparks from KPMG and Lord Dr. Michael Hastings whenever he had come for his visit for the Boyles lecture. And in that recommendation, after he heard our application and our research, and he basically provided a recommendation at the end that for the College of Business and for Appalachian State to drive further into sustainability, we should incorporate this club in Enactus. And within Enactus, basically you don't just meet up in clubs and start something kind of local that fades each semester as new people come into the ranks or whatever. basically you reach out into the community and create something, create value into your community to the point where once we graduate, it's still effective in Boone. And then wherever you relocate after you graduate, you're able to implement that same model, whether you relocate to Hong Kong, Silicon Valley, New York City, because the same problems are applicable to everyone across the world. So I think overall I joined because I knew that I needed to create value, and I knew that other students would want to create value once they relocated or even if they stay in Boone, and want to know they had a lasting impact on the Boone community. So I think that would be
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. So I was just wondering, how do you judge at the World Cup? Because it's hard to measure fresh water in some foreign country versus making jobs here. Because even if you're homeless here, that's still slightly better than having no clean water somewhere else. So how do you judge that?
That's right. That's one of the biggest challenges with our program. And Brad's nodding because Brad's been a judge and he knows how hard it is to judge. So really what we're doing is trying to understand how sustainably are you addressing the challenge that you choose. So we're not deciding between, is it better that a team picked to address clean water or hunger? But the way that they're solving that issue, is it the most sustainable way to do it? Because as Jacqueline said, our goal isn't to create a project that this team creates for 1 year. We want that solution to go on forever. We believe that there are sustainable business solutions. But that said, the competition is a celebration of every single team there. So even though only one team wins, and this year the team from Canada won, and the team from Canada did a project in Zambia, but actually they won for a project in Zambia, but they ended up meeting a bunch of partners who want to fund a project they're doing in northern Canada to address food insecurity. They developed a new hydroponic growing material that they developed through some of the students who are biology majors and hard science majors, but then took that hydroponic growing material to northern Canada where there's no sun, and so they have very little fresh produce. And they worked with youth, primarily teenage youth who are not in school, to develop a small business franchise where that hydroponic growing material is being sold to families who don't have access to produce for a very reasonable price, $2 a piece, and it's producing food. Guess what happened when they won at the national competition before they came to the World Cup? They presented that very simple business that a bunch of 15-year-olds, by the way, are building. They're one of the partners in the audience of a company some of you may know, Tim Hortons, which is a big restaurant chain, said, we want to introduce you to the government. Next year, that program is going to roll out across all of Canada. The entire country will have that program roll out. Now, that's not what they won for, but it's indicative of the kinds of things that our students see. So when we talk about celebrating one team, we know that there are millions of other projects, frankly, that are going to get attention and funding through our competition. That's why we're really looking for projects that are sustainable, and that's what we reward. But the competition itself is an opportunity to give a voice and raise awareness for all the projects ongoing. Does that make sense?
I think I'm next. So this is a question for Jacqueline. I know the Enactus chapter on campus is fairly new, and I was wondering if you've already picked out an issue and if you have a project that you guys are already pursuing, or if you're still accepting ideas and things like that.
So basically this past week, we actually started our conversation on what kind of impact we wanted to have, and then what aligned with the issues that present the Boone community. And one of those things that kept reoccurring in our conversation was hunger. So right now, that's kind of hunger insecurity, I think, is where we're at right now, in the sense that that's just what seems to prevail. And we're trying to create our needs assessment now, where we're starting up a conversation with community panelists. We're still actually looking for community panelists, for anybody that would want to speak to me or Eric or anyone else in the team about that after this. And we're wanting to just basically get a panel conversation about like what the Boone community needs and what issues are burdening them. So yeah, we're still we're still in the conversation of the needs assessment right now. Yeah, thank you.
And if I can jump in, if you have an interest in joining Enactus, we have a form on the website, entrepreneurship.appstate.edu, where you can jump on and fill out your interest form.
And to address that last question too, I would encourage the budding team of entrepreneurs and startup leaders here to think about identifying a number of needs, and you may not be able to address them in this first year, but start to articulate and define your needs assessment, because most of our teams have anywhere, if a team is, the average that we use in the US is if a team is 5 or more years old, they have 20 projects in different phases of development. We know that 18 of those may fail, but they're learning about needs and they're refining each time. So I would encourage you to start that conversation and then kind of document other needs that team members might be interested in or the community might need that you think you can meet with an innovative solution.
All right, it might be my turn. Since this is our first year with Enactus, I wanted to ask your opinion on whether or not we should think locally with our community or if we should try to think more globally.
So I would definitely say locally for so many reasons, right? But the myriad of challenges in your local community is first and foremost the reason. But it also gives you a much closer tie to your community and helps you develop, I think, solutions that are probably more sustainable. And so we always encourage our students to think first in their backyard. There are some university teams that once they are so well developed, they have the capacity with overseas studies programs to look at other communities. But we really believe that the investment in your own community is the first and most important one.
How well does this work with community colleges as well?
So we do work with community colleges indeed. It has not been a focus in the past, but I remember my first US national competition and a community college won. And I saw a group of deans off in the corner from some of the largest research institutions, and they were quite agitated. I'll be honest. So yes, we definitely do, and we are always looking to expand our reach. And on that note, for any of you who know the Canadian education system, there are universities and there are essentially colleges, which are the equivalent of community colleges. The team that won the World Cup this year is a college. It beat the equivalent of Harvard at their national competition. All right, I think that's it. I just want to thank you all for your time and your attention. I know I gave a lot of information about what we do, but I really wanted this community to understand what the capacity and potential is for Enactus. I'm honored that those of you who've taken this on have done it. I will be available to you, as is our whole team, and I'm very excited to welcome you to the national competition next year. For those of you in the community, I encourage you to get involved and help support this team, because it is really the network of business and community leaders along with these students who will drive the most impact. So thank you very much.
Okay, lunch is going to be in the Parkway Ballroom upstairs. Rachel will be joining us for lunch, as will several of the other speakers for the program. I can see some of them starting to show up around. So Parkway Ballroom, we'll have some lunch. And then don't forget that we're back here at 2 p.m. and Google will be talking to us about getting online with your business and all the tools and trips to make that happen.